Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 441 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again. And Enforcer, I have to say, that old anthem is bussin'.
Man, I gotta tell you, man, it be bullin' on God. And I gotta say, welcome back, everyone, to day 441 of the news, where the Ukrainian army is still conducting an absolute sweep against Russian forces in Bakhmut tonight, as the Wagner unit was nearly encircled near the highway perimeter in several places, and there have been video proof of large surrenders of both the 72nd Brigade and some of Wagner's own fighting forces. Once again, it's been an unbelievable day in the news of the war. One of those days that you always look forward to. And I wonder, Matthew, if the Russian bots will be back. If so, we've got the soy jack, well, no, not the soy jack, the Wojak cooking up, and that Wojak's going to pop up on screen if we get any DDoS attacks tonight. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our first bit of news inside of Russia, into the town of Ryazan, where we saw that the Russians unveiled a new memorial, but they had an interesting choice of music. And I'd have to say it's actually the most fitting choice of music they could have ever made. And so without further ado, here is the clip. And so they're unveiling the monument. And if you hear it in the background, I'm kind of scared of even playing it because it might be a bit of a copyright issue. They're playing the anthem of the nation from the Hunger Games. You know, the dystopian, like, alternate reality world where people are, like, starving and stuff and they go and kill each other in a pit for food. They're playing that song as they unveil this monument. I don't think they understand the irony, or they do understand the irony of playing that song. But this is hilarious. And also, they even pulled out the little Moscow guards. Look at them all dressed up in their nice little uniforms. That's where all the rest of the Russians' Ministry of Defense funds went, was into these two guys' uniforms. Because, sadly, the Russians are no longer able to put chrome onto their wheel tires. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip. I would play the rest of it, but I think it might actually be a bit of a copyright issue. But still, always interesting to see what they're doing inside of Russia. We're now going to be moving on and making sure that we have no international news to cover, just in case if I forgot it. We're now going to be moving on into the border area around, I guess you could say, the Belgorod Oblast. And we've actually heard of some interesting things going on. We don't really have a lot of information, however, to say exactly what's going on in this area, but we do have a decent amount of video footage showing that there is a firefight going on the Russian-Ukrainian border that is of a significant size. And so starting off with our first clip, we saw some explosions occurring near the border as the first video that came out from the Shebekino area. We can see the flare of a missile in the distance, rocketing up into the sky and disappearing into the cloud cover.
Там было зарево. Сейчас опять ебенет.
We now hear the air raid sirens going on.
Нихуя себе, блять, ну его нахуй, а?
It's now cutting to another clip. You once again hear explosions in the distance, and these are videos taken from the Kharkiv area and the Kharkiv Oblast, but these were not explosions that were occurring in Kharkiv. These were explosions that were occurring incredibly close, or even on the other side in some instances, of the Russian border. This was then accompanied by video footage from the town of Shebekino on the Russian side of the border, where it was heard that there was a massive firefight happening. And so here's the clip. And from this cameraman in Shebekino, listen. That sounds like a whole firefight. Oh, it's heating up. Dang, that's a little bit of an active firefight going on out there. We now see the explosions of something in the air. Maybe an AA gun firing into the air, and its rounds exploding after a certain distance traveled. But that's the end of the clip, and it's got to be said that something interesting is going on near Shebekino. We don't know exactly what it is. We do not know if Ukrainian forces have crossed the border and are now engaging Russian forces or the garrison that is at Shebekino. We're not exactly sure, but it is wild to see that there is something going on right in just a few miles aside of the Russian border. We're now going to be moving on a little bit further down and into the area of Urakovo, a very small village on the Russian border. We also found another Urakovo down here. This one was called Urakovo Vasilivka, but the way this one was spelled, it actually turned up being the Russian Urakovo deep within Russian borders, because it's spelled, instead of with an I, it's spelled with an E, as you can see right there. Now, apparently, from what we can understand, if the spelling is correct, and this is the Urakovo in the Belgrade Oblast of the Russian Federation, a Polish volunteer corps crossed the border in that area as well, and managed taking out an entire BMP-1, hanging their flag up on it for some pictures, and then we don't know what's happened to them beyond that. We don't know if they've gone back across the border into Ukraine, or if they're continuing to stay over there. But this may be, if the spelling of the village is correct, because this is the Russian spelling of Urakovo, and there's only one Russian-spelled Urakovo right in the Belgrade Oblast. If that is the correct spelling, that means that not only is there a firefight potentially going on at Shebekino, but there is an entire volunteer corps of Polish soldiers moving through the Belgrade Oblast and blowing up Russian, I guess you could say, border guard forces that are in the Belgrade Oblast area. So once again, pretty wild to see, and we will be trying to see if we can confirm whether the Urakovo here is spelled correctly, or if this is the Urakovo Vasilivka that is in the Bakhmut battlefield area. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news on the Russian border, and now straight into Kyiv. Because many people, and this is something that we actually had a little bit of a confusion of here on this channel, many people reported about a week ago at this point that a Kinzhal hypersonic missile had been shot down by a Patriot air defense battery. That was actually reversed on our channel live on air as being untrue at the moment that news came out. The Ukrainians then turned around and did a 180 the next day and said that they had in fact shot down a Kinzhal hypersonic missile. And then the United States, just yesterday, the Department of Defense, also confirmed that information as well. And I'll actually show you all that clip, because I had a few people in the comments section of last night's stream saying that he did not say that word for word. So I'm just going to skip forward to the part where the reporter asked him that question directly, just to give a little bit of clarification here.
A Russian missile by employing the Patriot missile defense system.
You did confirm that a Patriot downed this Kinzhal missile. Did I hear that right?
Right there. You hear the reporter, he said, a Patriot system downed this Kinzhal missile, and then the press officer said that is correct. So we do have confirmation right there that it was a Patriot air defense system, according to the Department of Defense, that did shoot down that Kinzhal missile. And now today, if anyone was still skeptical, they actually put the components of the Kinzhal hypersonic missile on display in Kyiv, showing that it had in fact been shot down, and they now have physical proof of the missile. And so here are some of the pieces of the Kinzhal.
Okay.
And we can see them right there. So if anyone ever had a question up until this point, oh, they didn't shoot down a Kinzhal hypersonic missile. Oh no, they did, because here's the pieces of it in the center of Kyiv. It made it to Kyiv, but it didn't make it to Kyiv in one piece, that's for sure. And so now we know this. Now we know that, man, this is hilarious. The only thing the Russians had going for them propaganda-wise at this point technologically was that hypersonic missile. Now their dookie little hypersonic missile can't even make it through air defense. It gets shot down by a Patriot.
It's pathetic. And also, is the Kinzhal missile really hypersonic? Because I've seen some folks saying it's really not. They just call it that. So, like, what's the actual scoop on it?
The actual scoop is that technically, by the stats that are publicly known, it is a hypersonic missile because it can travel at speeds of up to Mach 10. So it does fall within the hypersonic missile category, because I believe hypersonics are any missile that travels over around Mach 8. So it does fall well within that range, at least by its publicly stated numbers. So it is a hypersonic. The interesting thing, however, is that up until this point, it was believed that a hypersonic missile like the Kinzhal would be able to fly so quickly that it would not be able to be picked up on radars fast enough and engaged by air defense quick enough to actually stop it. It would make it to its target far too quickly for any air defense to be effective. But now, that's been proven to be completely untrue, because the Patriot, which is a pretty tried and old system, at least compared to the Kinzhal, which was introduced into Russian service in 2017. The Patriot air defense system was introduced, I believe, in the very early 90s, like 1991 or 1990. It's been around for a pretty good while, about 30 years. The hypersonic missile in practical service less than 5. And yet we're seeing that a 32-year-old surface-to-air missile system can shoot down a brand new hypersonic missile. So even there, I'm gonna say what?
That's astonishing that the Patriot could shoot down something going that fast. I wish we had some video to see it, because I'm not saying that I necessarily doubt the official story here, but that's unbelievable. We have tech that can shoot something down that quickly, going that fast.
Well, I mean, if you ever wanted true proof, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Here are the components of the Kinzhal hypersonic missile right here, sitting out here on pallets in the middle of a park in Kyiv, showing that they did manage to shoot one down. I mean, that is about as solid a proof you can get.
Okay.
I mean, that's crazy. It's actual parts of a Kinzhal. They can't get these anywhere because these Kinzhals are, of course, safely, I guess you could say heavily protected and heavily guarded by the Russian Federation. Only a few special air squadrons of MiG-31Ks have these Kinzhal hypersonic missiles at their air bases ready to be loaded onto their aircraft. And so the fact that the Ukrainians even have the components in broken up parts of one shows that it was actually shot down. It's insane. It's really unbelievable. I'm sure the United States will get their hands on this thing here soon, and we'll start to look at it and figure out what actually makes this thing work the way it does and how effective it really is. But I think we've learned one thing for certain. Hypersonic missiles are garbage and nothing more than a propaganda ploy, because even our basic air defenses can shoot this thing down without any relative difficulty, at least from what we can tell now. And so that's great. That's great. I love to see it. Matthew, what do we say around here? We love to see it. Love to see it. And so
love to see it. Love to see it.
We do. We love to see it. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into our location unknowns. And we also have some pretty interesting ones tonight. First off, we saw that a Ukrainian Novator armored personnel carrier was damaged by some kind of a mine. Of course, the crew did survive, and so the Novator did do its job. And we saw it being loaded onto the back of a recovery vehicle to be brought back behind the lines for some vital repairs, and then send it right back up to the front. Oh, man, they got that.
That was a song?
I think that was a song. It sounded like bass, honestly.
Man, it sounded like a factory or something for a minute.
I know, it sounded like a steel mill or something, but we can see them putting the Novator onto the back of this truck, using the crane to lift up the bed it's been loaded onto. And we can see it being ever so gently loaded up. Of course, Ukrainian APCs are really armored personnel carriers, or armored cars for that matter. Their only purpose is not to survive the hit, but to keep the crew alive. And from what we can tell, while the front, I guess you could say, axle was completely blown off of the Novator, there was no damage, visible damage, that we can see of the crew compartment. And so this Novator, much like every other armored car that the Ukrainians have been using, has done its job incredibly well. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and into an interesting fact sheet. And I thought I would show you all this because this really puts it into perspective how badly Russian forces are really doing. This is a loss chart of the, I guess you could say, Soviet Union and now Russian Federation through all of the wars that they've been in since the Second World War, and all of the deaths that have been counted in the course of those wars. Of course, you know, a lot of people say that there were no Soviet forces present in Korea or anywhere else. There were, to a small amount, and some of them actually did end up getting killed. 120 of them in Korea, around nearly 700 of them in Hungary during the Hungarian uprising of 1956, when the Soviet Union sent in their own forces to put that rebellion down, and kind of showed that communist countries didn't really have the kind of, I guess you could say, freedom that Western countries had, because this was during Khrushchev's era, and they still put them down violently, and around 700 Soviet or Russian soldiers died. There was even some that died through all of the conflicts that Egypt had with Israel, around 21 of them over those 3 wars. We also saw that just a handful of them died in other places, for example, Algeria, back when the French were fighting in Algeria in the early 60s, in Vietnam, in Mozambique, in Czechoslovakia during their uprising, during the Sino-Soviet border conflict in between China and Russia, which is something that a lot of people don't know, is that there were some guys, around 58 guys that got killed in that border skirmish, and that's why China ended up, although communist, aligning itself a lot more with the United States than the Soviet Union, because they were actually shooting at each other over the border for a good bit, and it was a very tense situation for several decades. Of course, a few in Angola, a few in Ethiopia, but now we're starting to get into the serious numbers. These are the numbers right here in Afghanistan that would actually lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Just 14,000 to 16,000 Soviet soldiers killed, or Russian soldiers killed, more like, over the course of 10 years. And back when this war happened in Afghanistan, this was considered detrimental. This was the Soviet Union's Vietnam, as far as the Soviets were concerned. It was a pointless war to them. Tons of guys died. It was an unfathomable number to the Russian public at that point, the Soviet public at large, that 14 to 16,000 guys could be killed inside of a pointless war like that. And some actually say that the war in Afghanistan was a large turning point, along with perestroika and glasnost, that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And keep that in mind. Just 14 to 16,000 dead over the course of 10 years. That means that just a little over 1,000 guys were dying per year in Afghanistan, and back in the day that was considered way too much to the average Russian. And then the Soviet Union collapsed, and of course the Russian Federation came around, and then we started to see that the numbers in almost every war start to get consistently large, but they've only been in a handful, really. For example, Chechnya, where around 12,000 to 25,000 Russian soldiers were killed through both of the Chechen wars. Pretty high number when you really think about it, because Chechnya is an incredibly small place. Hell, I mean, like, it's tiny. Even compared to Ukraine, it's incredibly small. It's smaller than Georgia. And then, of course, in Georgia, around 64 guys were killed. We actually got a pretty hard-set number on that. But they still didn't do well there. And then through 2014 to 2022, in Ukraine, in the DPR and LPR, they lost an estimated 6,000 to 7,000 soldiers, lost another 264 in Syria. All those were mostly Wagner forces that went up against the United States and then lost. And then Ukraine. And interestingly enough, this number is far off from what we know as the number. They say that somewhere around 60,000 to 70,000 soldiers have died, according to the CSIS, in this Ukraine war. Our number right now is hovering somewhere around 195 to 196,000 Russian soldiers killed. And when you put that into perspective, of every single conflict that the Russians have ever been involved in, either majorly or in a minor way, ever since the Second World War, this is the deadliest war that Russia has ever fought since World War II.
Dang.
That is crazy when you really think about it. And it also shows you how well the Ukrainians are really doing, considering that they went to a whole load of places that were considered bloodbaths like Afghanistan, and they don't even pale in comparison to what Ukraine has turned into. And I thought these numbers were unbelievable to see, because when you really put into perspective on a chart, the losses that the Russians are taking in Ukraine are absolutely unbelievable. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little chart and on into our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we got to see a Ukrainian soldier sitting inside of the driver's position of a captured Russian T-72B3 that they're now using on the front lines. And this was fairly interesting because the inside of this thing was garbage. Look at it. Like, this thing looks like it's made out of plaster of Paris, and it's just covered in filth.
I'll be honest, it really doesn't look that bad. It's not, our stuff, but it doesn't look half bad.
Half bad? Dude, this is terrible. Let me pull up, wait, hang on, let me pull this up. M1A1 driver's compartment. So, this is what the driver's compartment of an M1 Abrams series tank looks like. Notice.
Oh yeah, but this is like top of the line though. This is our stuff.
Top of the line. This is what we call standard over here. Our whole entire army uses these tanks. What, are you kidding me?
Is this mil spec or civilian spec?
Listen, man, we here in America, there's no such thing as mil spec. Everything over here is made to high civilian standards, like we're trying to sell it at a used car dealership or a new car dealership for that matter. But this thing looks like trash. I mean, like, hell, look at it. The inside, the paint's chipping off everywhere. There was no maintenance of this thing whatsoever before it got into Ukrainian hands. The only thing that looks modern in here is a small little LCD screen over here on the left side of the driver's compartment. That's about it. Beyond that, the rest of this, it's not up to spec to me. I mean, this thing looks like roaches are going to be crawling through it here in a minute. It's terrible. You know what, Matthew? That might be a good poll to put up. Is this T-72B3 decent or not? and just put yes or no, and let's see what people think, because I think this is a trash-looking T-72. And it is a T-72A that's just been heavily upgraded over the course of like 50 years, so it would look like this, but then again, it also wouldn't, because there were a decent amount of tanks in U.S. service that were in service for like, hell, 30 years. Most of the Abrams have been in service for about 30 years or 40 years at this point, and a lot of them still look fine. This, however, this is not fine. Of course, it's great to know that the Ukrainians are using it, but hopefully they don't run into the problems that the Russians have left behind due to their poor maintenance of their own tanks. And so with that...
Now, you know, the screen over there on the left side, that doesn't look like something the Russians would have put inside the tank. That looks like something that might have been added.
Oh, I think it actually is something that the Russians had in it, but they had to have this kind of tech imported because the Russian computer industry doesn't exist. So this was most likely imported tech. The Ukrainians will be able to keep this up, but if it was up to the Russians, this probably would have eventually broken down, and they would have run out of parts to keep it running. So then the driver would just have to look over the periscope up front to keep the thing, you know, moving where he can see it. But still, pretty interesting to see. But with that, we're going to be moving on. Once again, I want to compare the driver compartment here. Here is an M1 Abrams driver compartment. Look at that. Clean, nice, lush, and highly...
recliner style seating.
Yeah, really technological. Also, this appears to be... I can't really tell if this is from the turret basket and they're looking at the driver's compartment, or if they somehow sandwiched the camera at the front part of the hull and they're looking back towards the turret basket. I think this is from the turret basket. Here's another picture of an Abrams driver's position. And yeah, you can actually see the turret basket right back there in that one. But there you have it. That is an M1 Abrams driver compartment, just a normal one. You can see a little bit of scratches and dents showing it has been used versus that T-72B3. And that's the difference in between contract soldiers taking care of equipment versus conscripts taking care of equipment. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip, which I just thought was bizarre how poorly maintained that T-72B3 had been up till that point. And we're now moving on into the Russian casualty report of the day. And the Russian...
Oh, they only got one.
Only one. Only one.
That's still good, though.
And we can see, of course, the memes from the KJ. Thank you, KJ. And we can even see that let me make sure I get this right. Moore threw in a whole number 1 made out of burning bobcats. We see the SWAT bobcat, more burning bobcats. And we have more bobcats in the reply section than there were in the losses today. There was only one bobcat skid steer that was destroyed. But the Russians did lose out in a pretty decent scale in most other figures. They lost 690 Russian soldiers today. A pretty decent amount. And we also saw that they lost 18 armored personnel carriers over the past 24 hours. That's well above average, according to most of the war's figures. And I gotta say, it is good to see. We're most likely seeing these higher APC loss numbers because the Russians are taking heavy losses in the Bakhmut area right now, and a lot of those are ending up being armored personnel carriers. We're not really seeing a lot of Russian armor there anymore. That may be because they are running out of armor and they're starting to use it very sparingly, or they may not have any to use. So it seems as though the APCs are now the ones taking the brunt of all of the losses. We also saw that 5 supply trucks were destroyed over the past 24 hours as well. This is below the war's average, but this kind of comes and goes in the waves of losses that they take. It'll be low for maybe 1 or 2 days, and then it'll skyrocket up into the 20s, maybe even 30s for a few, and then drop back down to practically nothing. But still, not bad losses at all. Only 2 main battle tanks were lost today, and one thing we have started to notice is that what we used to call throughout the war average tank losses are now becoming the higher end of tank losses. Just over the course of this war, tank losses are becoming lower and lower, and it may be, like we've been saying, that the Russians are running out of tanks, and if anything proves that, it was the Victory Day parades in Russia and St. Petersburg and Moscow, where there were no modern tanks present, and that may be showing that they have such a bad problem of trying to supply main battle tanks to their forces that they had to pull all of the armor that would have been used in the Victory Day parade to send it out to the front lines to try and give the Russians some kind of tank support. We also saw that 8 artillery systems were destroyed, a fairly good number, around 2 artillery batteries, 6 drones, 1 MLRS, and 15 cruise missiles, along with an anti-aircraft warfare system, were destroyed over the past 24 hours as well. All in all, not that bad of a day for the Ukrainian armed forces in the casualty report, and it's going to get better as we get closer to Bakhmut. I promise you all that. We're pretty much hanging out in Bakhmut for the rest of the night. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the loss report and on towards the front lines, starting off in the northeast near Svatove, and then almost pretty much hopping down to Bakhmut and staying there, because I think, if I remember the count correctly, we have something like 14 different videos and pictures from Bakhmut today. It's picking up. It's heating up a lot, and that's because the Ukrainians are down there and putting a beating onto Russians, the likes of which you've never seen. Now, if you think that you've seen a beating before, like Mike Tyson going up against someone in the ring, or even the great Klitschko from Ukraine giving a beat down to someone in the ring, you haven't seen anything compared to what the Ukrainian army is doing to the 72nd Brigade and Wagner right now in the southern and central areas of Bakhmut City. So, with that, we're going to be moving into the northeast, but before we get into that news, we've got to cover the polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and while it's fresh on our minds, let's cover the poll that's currently running. And the question is, do you think the T-72 was in decent shape? Looks like 50% said yes, it works, good enough. 20% said unsure, and 31% said no, it was horrible, bad condition. And I would say for a T-72, it wasn't too bad. Obviously, like I said, it's not up to our standards, but for what it is, it works. The LCD screen was probably the coolest thing in the entire little sitting area there. The rest was pretty outdated, but, you know, it's a military vehicle. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I still don't think it's that good because it just looks like trash. I mean, like think about it compared to everything else. Let me even show you a Leopard 2's driver compartment. That's the driving compartment of a Leopard 2. Look how good that looks. I mean, it looks great. There's no paint.
Oh, yeah, it's
chipping.
German, though. That's German precision.
Oh, come on. Look, here's the whole thing. Here's a wide shot of it. Look at this. This is what I call a driver's position right here. It's clean. It's well kept up. There's a little bit of grime, but not like the captured Russian tank where the paint was literally chipping off and it looks like you're going to get asbestos poisoning. It looks good. I think this is good. This is what I say is the standard of cleanliness in an armored vehicle, and shows that it's been well maintained and it probably runs well, just because the basic things like interior cleanliness is being kept up. In that T-72B3, I just don't see it. The Ukrainians probably did a good job of making sure that thing's in running order, but it's still a Russian tank, and it's a poorly maintained Russian tank at that. So I'm going to have to stick with my guns there and stick with the 30% that said it's in foul shape, especially compared to anything that we would be using in the West. Hell, wait a minute, hang on. Let me go find this. A Challenger 2. Let's go for the whole gamut. We showed an Abrams, we showed a Leopard. Let's look at the Challenger. And so, let's see here. That one's not a good picture. I'm trying to find a good picture. That was not a good picture either. You can hardly see in there. Dang, why are all the Challenger 2 pictures so grainy? And also,
these aren't exactly up to Rolls-Royce standards, are they?
No, I would say the North. If these are Challenger 2 driver compartments, these are actually giving the Russians a run for their money. But I don't think we're getting
My
good.
goodness. Wait, that's a Soyuz reentry module.
What the hell? Wait a minute, is there even any pictures of the Challenger 2's driving compartment, or are they just showing us some random stuff? Huh.
What in the hell is that?
I don't even know. That looks like the roof of the hull. I don't think there's any good pictures of a Challenger 2's driver's compartment. Wait, hang on. That looks like... That doesn't look like the driver's compartment. I don't think we actually have one for the Challenger 2. Maybe the Leclerc? We'll try one more for the Leclerc just to get some context here.
The Brits are behind the times, I would say. They're almost on par with the Russian interior of the tanks.
One second. I would have to agree with that completely. And so here is the interior of a Leclerc, which is the French main battle tank, pictured here. This is the interior driving position for them.
Oh.
That's
Man, what is that steering wheel out of like a little Fisher or Fisher and Price like playset or something?
Yeah, it's even got little buttons on it, so that way when you want to go take a left turn, you click a button and it does a left turn, like a 90-degree left turn.
Where's the reverse handle at? There's got to be a big lever in here for reverse somewhere.
Dude, I think it's a giant like Nintendo 64 joystick right here. The steering. Dude, this thing's actually kind of funny. I think this is the gunner's position right here in the turret. They don't really take a lot of pictures of driver positions, do they, in these tanks? It's almost like they don't want us to see them. But there's another picture of another Leclerc's driver position. I just don't know what's up with that steering wheel. I gotta admit, that thing's kind of funny looking. But still, compared to the T-72B3, this is still in far better shape, even in Fisher-Price shape, than that T-72B3. No question about it. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, Russia admits that the Ukraine war has been very difficult, and do you think that they truly understand the situation? It looks like 60% said yes, they know they are failing badly, 5% said unsure, 7% said they might not, and 28% said no, they are in complete delusion. And I personally think that the Russian leadership knows exactly how bad the situation is. Obviously, they're not going to portray that publicly because that would undermine public support for this unjustified war, and they have to keep up the lies and the illusion that it's a justified one, or otherwise the citizens have the possibility of revolting and also not joining the military to go fight in the war. So lies as usual coming out of Russia, and I really do believe that they know what's actually happening. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the Russians admitting that the war has been difficult is kind of hilarious in a way, because how in the hell, it's been so long. It's been 441 days of what was supposed to be an operation that was supposed to take 3 days or a week at worst. It's been 441 days. Now they're going to come out and go, it's kind of difficult. No crap, it's difficult. They haven't been able to do anything. They're now getting beat in the only place that they had a fighting chance of doing anything, and they're getting beat there. That tells you that it's tough for them. And this is what I have to say. A lot of people have been wanting to say, and it seems as though it's like trying to give benefit of the doubt to Putin, that maybe he doesn't really know how bad it is. Maybe people are lying to him about how the situation is going. They couldn't be, because there's just too many things that he would have to be aware of at this point, like their lack of armor. Like, look at that victory parade. Tell me that he wouldn't notice that the entire armor column of the parade was missing, or the aviation column was also missing as well. There's so many things that he has visibly been seen to observe that would show that they're not doing well in this war. And so I would have to say that they know all the way at the top, all the way up to Putin, that this war has been going terribly from the start. There's nothing they can do about it, though. They've pulled out all of the stops except for nuclear weapons. They've done everything they can to try and turn this war around. There's just no way they can do it. The Russian army isn't built for a modern war. They have terrible tacticians. They're incredibly corrupt. They steal most of the equipment before it even makes it to the front lines. It was a lost war before it even started, in my honest opinion, and I bet the Russian government knew that as soon as the first month that passed of the war. They knew they were just going through the motions until the Russian army died, and then the country would die however far down the road it would be. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, I've seen some folks say that the inside of the Challenger 2 tank is classified. That's probably why we didn't see any pictures of it.
Oh, that's why we're seeing those barrels.
If that's the case, I take back my statements about the Brits, because I saw some Brits getting some fights going in the chat down there. So I retract those statements.
Wait a minute, hang on. If it's classified, Challenger 2 interior. Let's see if there are any pictures. Oh, wait a minute. There are some pictures of the interior. This one right here.
Jack the Dripper must have put this out on Discord.
Wait, hold up. That is not a Challenger 2. That is another Apollo capsule.
Yeah, I don't think there are any images out there of it.
No, I don't think there is. I think that's a true statement, that the interior of this tank is classified. But, the Ukrainians have some of these things. Someone's going to take a video of the interior of one of these things at some point in the future. It's got to happen. And I would, not for the OPSEC reason, I wouldn't want the pictures to violate OPSEC or anything like that, but I would like to see the pictures so that way we could compare it to things like the Abrams interior, the Leopard interior, or even the Leclerc interior. That was very bizarre to say the least, but thank you all for sharing that with us. I didn't actually know that the interior pictures of the Challenger were classified, unlike every other Western tank that isn't classified. But with that, once again, we want to make sure to correct that, because we don't want anyone in Britain thinking we're dissing on y'all's tank when we're looking at pictures of probably the inside of a Russian tank that's being sold to us as a Challenger. But with that, we are on to the next one. But before we do, if the interior pictures of that tank are classified, that thing's got to look like the space shuttle inside of that thing to be classified still.
Or it looks like maybe it looks sort of somewhat behind the times, and they're trying to keep it secret to avoid people getting upset about it.
Maybe, but the Challenger 2 is a tank from the 90s. There's no way that it would be that old looking.
Seems kind of odd that they classified that, but we don't classify ours, because ours are probably, a little bit better than theirs. No bias there.
Well, I mean, I don't know, man, because one thing's for certain. only two Challenger tanks have ever been lost in combat, and both of those were to friendly fire. They've never been destroyed by enemy fire, ever, in the war in Iraq or anywhere else they've been. And so there's got to be something about them that is a notch above the rest that's able to keep them that well protected, because they have a better track record in terms of their loss rate than any other Western tank in the world right now. So maybe it's well above everyone else's tank, and it's a really high-quality tank, and so they don't want anyone to see the inside of it. Who knows?
Maybe so. Also, I saw somebody say Chinese tanks are the best, and
Hell no!
I don't know
Hell
about that.
no! Wait, hang on. Now I got to do it. Now, dang it! You made me go down this rabbit hole. Here, look. No. This thing is ugly. It's atrocious. This is like their best main battle tank, the ZTZ-99. They have like 350 of these things. And it's ugly. I mean, I don't even care about the performance of this thing. It is ugly. And then the bulk of their forces are ZTZ-96s, which are these little ugly things right here. It's like a ZTZ-99, but smaller and worse in every way.
I'll be honest, the design isn't bad. It kind of resembles the Leopard a little bit, but I know that internally this thing is probably a horrible quality.
Dude, this thing is the Wish.com Leopard, man. I'm not giving this thing any credit for nothing. I mean, hell, this is what... look at this thing. That's what it really looks like under that. It's like a T-72.
Ooh.
It just looks cool because it's heavily upgraded. You know, like a T-72B3. Under that cool-looking armor and paint job, it is this little piece of garbage right here. I'm never giving the Chinese credit for anything. Their tech is crap, just like the Russians. They just put on a good show, and that's it. And also, here's another picture of another ZTZ 96 without that armor on it. That one's so small, though. That one's not a good picture. Dang it, man. It's so hard to find good pictures that aren't from War Thunder, I'm telling you. Like, War Thunder has dominated the tank picture space of the internet. Wait a minute. Here we go. Here's one without the front armor again. It's ugly. It really is. The only saving grace it has is that, like, ERA armor that they tacked onto the front. That's it. But
well, they apparently knew it was ugly too for them to change the design to something more modern looking.
Yeah, I would have to agree. They must have decided it or something, or it may have been so outdated at that point as like a T-72 kind of thing, where it's like we have to upgrade this thing to keep it relevant, so we don't have to design and buy brand new tanks. That's probably what was behind it. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next poll.
All right, and our next poll, which is our last poll, says Italy has warned its nationals to leave Ukraine ASAP as the counteroffensive looms, and what are your thoughts? 40% said it's just precautionary, 26% said not good, it's about to get ugly, 6% said unsure, and 28% said great. The offensive is looming fast. And with this one, it seems like Italy has been probably tipped off that it's coming very, very soon. I know we've said that so many times, but it's going to happen eventually. So I think it's about to get ugly, but at the same time, it's a good thing because we've been waiting for this for quite some time. But Enforcer, what say you?
And can you reread that poll again? Because you said Italy, and for some reason that short-circuited me. So can you reread that poll again?
Yeah, the question said Italy has warned its nationals to leave Ukraine ASAP as the counteroffensive looms, and what are your thoughts?
I would say that's probably much like the United States, which actually did it a little bit earlier, I think a week or a week and a half ago. That may be them, much like the United States, trying to get their folks out before the counteroffensive begins, just in case the Russians try and do something crazy, like a massive missile attack or something else in retaliation. So it's probably in preparation for the counteroffensive, and hopefully it is coming soon. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. And now it's time for us to get on into those questions. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our first super chat question is going to go to none other than BC Skyman, the channel legend. He puts in a whopping $200 donation.
Holy moly!
And BC, thank you very much for extremely generous support. He says, chat question, please, and Enforcers rock.
With a big rock.
Yeah, he put a rock behind it. That messed me up.
Matthew is absolutely flabbergasted by the rock. Joining the Rock Johnson. But anyways, I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, BC Skyman, and helping this channel to keep on running, because that kind of support does help us to keep this thing rolling. It's massive, and we're completely blown away that folks support us like that. We'll make sure to get a live chat question, and thank you for saying we rock, because you rock for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, what is the live chat, Matthew?
And the live chat question is going to go to Marion Deemer, who says, what is up with the Russians evacuating people and troops from the area of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant?
We've heard about that for a good bit. they're saying that they're leaving it alone and they're just going to get out of there and kind of leave it. That's a weird statement, however, because they've been very vehement about trying to keep that power plant under their control throughout the entirety of the war, even mismanaging it under their control. It's kind of weird. I don't really know what that's leading to. I don't know if they're going to give an exclusionary zone over to the Ukrainians where they can ferry over their own reactor workers and things like that from the rest of, I guess you could say, Ukraine's nuclear energy grid and take it back over. I don't really know what that means, because one thing we did also hear is that they are supposedly taking the reactor workers themselves that work at the ZENPP, and they're taking them with them. And so there really is no one there to keep the reactor running. And although they're supposedly offline, you still have to have full staffing and a full crew working at this power plant, because they have to make sure that the reactors are still being cooled, because while it's offline, it still has to be cooled. There's really no such thing as the reactors just going offline and people just can leave. It's not like a car where you turn it on and off and you just walk off from it. Nuclear reactors require constant input as long as they're somewhat offline, but in a ready-to-go online state. Look
at the Chernobyl power plant, for example. They're still trying to cool that so it doesn't, melt through the ground and get down into the earth, the aquifers.
Yeah, hell, even look at U.S. power plants like 3 Mile Island. Back when 3 Mile Island had a partial meltdown, and let me go over here to show this to y'all. Here's 3 Mile Island. Back when reactor number 1 at 3 Mile Island had a partial meltdown, reactor number 2 never shut down. Reactor number 2 had to keep on running, and so an entire staff had to continue to work on reactor number 2. And so, to this day, while reactor number 1 has this giant, I think it's a melted down element at the bottom of the reactor and is completely inoperable, reactor number 2 is still functioning and running. You just can't shut down nuclear reactors like you can anything else. And so, if they're taking the workers with them, they may be trying to create a meltdown situation where the Ukrainians have to step in and then they can try and blame it on them. Who really knows? But it is an interesting situation nonetheless. It could also be a very simple explanation, is that they are scared of the Ukrainians conducting a counteroffensive, and they're trying to get people out of there so that way they can, quote-unquote, save them. Oh, wait a minute. The chat disconnected again. That's weird. Why in the world does it do that? Anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support, BC Skyman, in helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope we answered that live chat fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Mark, Colonel of the LSA, and he hasn't gotten a promotion ever since the last time. But Mark, thank you very much for the $115 donation to the channel to help keep us running, and we do appreciate it very much. And Mark says, I'm thinking that Ukraine is cunning. I think they'll draw the forces to the east and attack over the Dnipro. And remember, they also have mobile bridges, so they can set up in seconds. And thoughts? Oh, trust me, bro. Bachelor?
Homeschool much? And also, I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Mark, of course, and helping this channel to keep on running, because you've been a massive supporter of this channel, and thanks to you, we've been able to roll this thing ad-free, sponsor-free forever. We're even able to run our short summaries completely ad-free and sponsor-free, thanks to y'all's support, and I gotta thank you so much. And to answer that, I think they may try and do something like that. It's certainly within the realm of possibilities, because we have seen that Ukrainian forces on some of the larger rivers in western Ukraine have been training, and pictures have been taken of them and released by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense of them creating incredibly large, I guess you could say Bailey bridges, that are almost a half mile or three-quarter miles wide at their largest. And that is about the size, that is just under the size that they would need to be able to cross the Dnipro River. It's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that they may do something like that. It will be a little tricky for them, and it will require a little bit of extra effort and elbow grease in their end, but there's no reason to say that it's completely out of the picture. It's just that it would be a little bit more difficult than other kinds of offensives, but it would lead to the same results in the southern front as an offensive from the Zaporizhia direction on open ground. And so, with that, I thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support, Mark. I would have to agree with you on that. There may be a good chance there that the Ukrainians conduct an offensive like that, and if they do, that may be one of the most intricate and in-depth offensives ever done in this war, and if it was pulled off successfully, it's probably something that would end up being studied and reviewed by war colleges here in the United States as a successful river-crossing offensive. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Mark. I hope we did address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're getting on into the news and almost all the way into Bakhmut already.
All right, and the third and last one goes to Trister1, another channel legend who puts in a very generous $100 super chat. And thank you very much,
Hey!
Trister, for that support. And he says, Matt, say the Russian warship quote. YouTube won't let me type it in here, even at PG-13.
Oh. Oh, Matthew, you going to say it?
What was the quote, actually? I forgot.
Russian warship, that one.
Russian warship, go F yourself.
See, it's
that
just
it?
like Pavel Chekhov, please. But still. And I thank you so much for the support, Trister, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I think we can actually get the Ukrainian version of the quote. Russian warship in Ukrainian. Because it's
Don't we have like a clip of it being said?
We do, but I would have to go through the whole intro to find it again. Oh, here it is. Российские бойни коралли иди нахуй. And so there you go. It's a very butchered pronunciation of Ukrainian, but that's what that guy said on Snake Island to the Russian warship right there. And also, that's a part of our intro now, which is really cool because we brought back the OG anthem. We were able to bring it back from the dead, and it looks like a lot of y'all are loving that as well. And honestly, I love it. I love the anthem that Vanilla RPG's soundtracks made, but the original OG anthem we had was an amazing anthem. I just don't think there's any other rendition of the Ukrainian anthem that can be as good as that one. And so as soon as I saw that we could bring it back, I was like, we got to bring that thing back like right now. And so with that, thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Trister, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that was up to your standard, Bliet. I just saw him put Bliet in the live chat. But with that, we are now moving on from this question segment and on into the Northeastern Front, and finally, Deep State UA has been updating the map. I believe they may have not been updating the map because of the quick actions taken by Ukrainian forces in the area of Bakhmut, and because of that, they didn't update the map for several days, but we did get an update from the 7th to the 10th today, and believe it or not, over 72 hours, there was no frontline changes in the northeastern area. We did see a small amount of activity near the area of Svatove, where we saw a Ukrainian sapper detonating an anti-tank mine that they found on the side of the road. And I gotta say, Matthew, this is a really interesting little clip here, because if you notice the tanks that the Ukrainians have stopped so that way they can blow up the AT mine, they're of a specific, quote-unquote, high-end variety.
No.
Do you know what these are, Matthew?
They look like leopards?
No. They're Russian.
I have no idea.
They're captured
That's high-end?
T-90Ms.
They call that high-end?
That's what the Russians call high-end. I mean, that's their supposed cream of the crop. It's right there, and they have two of them that they were moving up to the front, but then they stopped because they spotted an AT mine on the road, and then the sampers came up and blew it up right here. And that thing packed a punch. And it's lucky that they found it. And I gotta say, Matthew, I feel sorry for the sad sap who had to go up and clear that mine. But with that, we're gonna be moving on from that clip and on into our next one further down the line in the area of Severbianka, where we saw a Caesar SPG, one of those French SPGs, in action. Back at the beginning of the war, this was my favorite SPG of them all. But I've started to change that more so in favor of some of the Czech-wheeled SPGs that we've been seeing lately. But we can see it fire right there, and of course laying down that important firepower that Ukrainian soldiers need to keep that front line stable and to eventually plan those counteroffensives like we've been seeing in Bakhmut. And now it's time for us to go into the absolute cesspit that Bakhmut has turned into, for the Russians, that is. You see, the Russians have turned this into a cesspit because the Ukrainian counteroffensive that is happening here right now was so unexpected. I believe they pissed and crapped themselves into an artificial Rasputitsa season, and it seems as though they're not coming back from it because there was a massive amount of prisoners taken in the northern area near Krasna Ora. These are soldiers of the 72nd Brigade. We can see some Ukrainian soldiers here. We can see one guy with what appears to be a Glock, I think. We haven't seen a lot of Glocks in this war. Yeah, that's a Glock for sure. Never seen a lot of those in the war. We can also see a guy with an AK-74 and 4 prisoners from the 72nd Brigade down there on the floor. While these guys look like the war is over for them, the smiles of these Ukrainian soldiers show the war is just starting for them, and they're going to be pushing these guys and their friends all the way back to Rostov-on-Don here soon. And it's always nice to see. We're now going to be moving on to a clip a little bit further behind the lines where we saw that the Ukrainians are using a captured Mr. B against the Russians. The Mista B is the wheeled artillery piece of the Russian army, one of the larger ones that they have. And we can see a picture right here of a Ukrainian artillery crew using the Russians' Mista B against the Russians. We can see the spent shells right there, and then we can see the little Ukrainian ribbon, the blue and yellow ribbon, that they've attached to this Russian towed artillery piece. And of course, really cool to see that they were able to not only capture one, but use it against the very people that brought it into their own country. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into our next clip, where speaking of captured Russian artillery pieces, we have some Russian volunteers in the Freedom of Russia Legion fighting in the area of Orikovo-Vasilivka. And this was what threw up some confusion today about the Polish Volunteer Corps that supposedly also had a successful operation around Orikovo, because their Orikovo was spelled the exact same way, but with an E, and it did not have the Vasilivka part attached to it. Theirs was located in Russia. This one from the Freedom of Russia Legion was located here at Orikovo, spelled with an I. And so here's the clip of the Russians operating in this area, well, the Russian Volunteer Corps operating in this area today. Man, they coming in with the beats. We got it muted, sadly, but we can see
1970s style synth.
Man, they got that synth type beat. They got that 1980s RoboCop vibe going on. And we can see them conducting what appears to be a little bit of training.
Just a little bit.
And a little laser.
The hell?
Like Mark Zuckerberg made it. We can see them firing an RPG. And now we can see them showing some ammunition on the tables. Loading up ammo into the backpacks. Getting the gear ready. And now it appears that they are in the fields. And they're getting to work. We now see them moving through the trenches and firing off a rifle grenade there. Doom, doom, doom. Now we can see them laying low from some artillery there. And now advancing forward. We now see them firing through somewhat taller grass. It appears that they're on a special mowing operation today.
Lawn mowing adventure right here.
And we can see them mowing the wheat stalks that are left as well. These just require a light trim. I wonder what this sounds like now. I bet you it sounds like absolute synthwave. Oh, it does. It sounds just like it. We can see them continuing on. We can see them dealing with a wounded soldier here. And now we can see them hanging out at a trench as the sun goes down after successfully pushing forward in this area near Orikovo-Vasilivka. We can now see some of the Freedom of Russia Legion soldiers moving forward. You can see the machine gunner cameraman once again laying low and signaling his fellow soldiers to come forward. We can now see them advancing down the tree line once more. Now we can see him looking up at something. We can't see it. But it appears that he got up and he got on the move quickly. Now we can see this guy. It looks like he's taking a head count here and then telling another soldier where to go. And that's the end of the clip, but a little bit of a look at what the Russians have been doing around the area of Orikovo-Vasilivka, just west of the city of Bakhmut. Moving a little bit behind the lines into the area of Pivorodny, we saw that the Wagner unit was also having a little bit of fun today. They've been having loads of fun over the past 2 days, and this is nothing more but a continuation of all the fun and joy that every Wagner soldier feels after they get out of prison and go straight into hell. And so here's the video. Also, we gotta mute that because the music is absolutely a vibe. But we can see the Wagner soldiers getting on top of a BMP-2, and we can see that one of them, oh no, oh, his tailbone's broken. Dang. Well, you know what they say. Sometimes you just gotta run with a broken tailbone behind the BMP. We now see
broken. Spinal.
Man, man, my back is broken. It's spinal. You don't know the kind of pain I'm going through. But we can see a Russian soldier getting artied or bombleted. We can't really tell. We can also see a Russian trench right here. You see a Russian soldier looking into the distance. We can also see another one back there. And now we can see that trench smoking a little bit after it's probably been bombleted or artied. Oh no, oh, this is going to end in disaster. Every single video like this one ends in disaster. We can see them getting off of the farm scooter and helping to push it uphill. Oh, this is a mistake. And now we can see them picking up a little bit of speed, it seems. Oh, what was this idiot doing?
Man.
Was he chasing the bomblet? Goofy.
And dang, he's still crawling away.
Oh, yuck. I tried to catch it and it blew up. But now we can see another guy running. He gets artied, and it looks like he's down. Another guy gets artied. Trench gets bombed. And now you see some Russians just, you know, hanging out, having a nap. And we can see some more Russians having a nap, and that's the end of the clip right there. But once again, the Wagner having fun in the sun, because nothing is funner than staying in Bakhmut. Speaking of staying in Bakhmut, it appears that regardless whether Wagner is allowed to leave or not, they are being joined by some good friends, Don. They're being joined by some good friends, Don. The Chechens have arrived, Don. And hell's about to break loose, Don. Get ready.
That's bad friends, actually. You don't want Chechens around. So that one stupid friend's always around doing something crazy, like getting in trouble.
Get ready for the goats to go missing. Get ready for some guys to be walking a little bit weirdly tomorrow. The Kadyrovite Chechens have arrived, and they're already looking stupid as hell. But here's the clip. And also I'm going to play a little bit of their music because it's kind of funny. Why the hell does it seem like they're going to be showing up to a beach vacation with that music? But anyways, we can see them trying to walk in, flagging the cameraman, of course. You got to flag the cameraman. It's not a Kadyrovite video without that. And we can see this guy giving some kind of a monologue to the camera, but the music is drowning him out. And we see the rest of the goobers coming on up. Of course, none of them have matching kit. None of them have helmets anymore. They used to have helmets at the start of the war. Helmets are now completely gone at this point in the war. They just don't have any left. And it's interesting to see the Chechen Kadyrovites have arrived. I'm sure this battle will be won soon now by the Ukrainians, because whenever these little idiots show up, they lose. And they lose every single time. So that we're going to be moving on from that little clip showing that the Chechen Kadyrovites are arriving in Bakhmut right now. And we're now going to be moving to the northern end of the city, where we saw some footage. Oh, wait a minute. By the way, I forgot. They did update the Bakhmut map. I have to show y'all how it's changed. So some of y'all may remember that this was the area, this small area right here, was the only perimeter that they controlled. They have expanded their perimeter, and the Russians have also advanced a little bit as well out of the park, which was expected considering that there was no defensible positions in the park. The Russians really just had to take the land. But the Ukrainians have retaken some parts of the city. Their defensive perimeter has grown almost by 100% compared to the size it was 3 days ago. And not only that, we got to see the massive gash that was made in the lines by the 3rd Brigade against the 72nd here in the south. And that is a hole right there. That thing is about, I think, 7 kilometers wide, if I remember the measurement correctly, and about 1.5 kilometers deep. So this is a pretty big hole. A massive one, as a matter of fact. And considering how deeply it punctured Russian lines, they may be completely exposed in that area right now. Who really knows? But anyways, getting on into the video clips again inside of the city of Bakhmut, we got some footage from the city today. Oh, we got that little balalaika.
Bad music.
And we can see some Russian APCs that have been charred up inside of the city. We can, of course, see the city is mostly destroyed. But it is another day in Bakhmut, and another day that the Ukrainians will use to their advantage to try and destroy as many Russian forces as possible, or push them on out of the city. We can also see a Humvee over there. And so with that, that's the end of the clip, but once again showing the city of Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip, where we also saw some Ukrainian soldiers inside of the city. What? What? What happened to the link? That's the wrong... Oh, anyways, we're moving on into our next clip, where we saw some Wagner guys walking through the ruins in the city, and it appears that they didn't look where they stepped, and they paid the price. We can see the little Wagner guys running through the rubble. Oh, no.
Oh, damn, that scared the hell out of me. About giving me a heart attack.
So he didn't run over an anti-personnel mine, Matthew, but as the squeaky noise you could hear, you see, that was actually covering up the sound of him busting his teeth out on the bricks that he just fell on right there. So, interesting to see, and it looks like the Wagner ought to be more careful where they walk, because they're not paying, if they're paying that little attention to the ground below them where they can trip and fall and bust their teeth out, imagine how little attention they're paying for anti-personnel mines or anything similar like that. But then again, it is the Wagner, it is prisoner convicts. They're used to just perfectly flat floors everywhere, walking from the prison cell to the cafeteria. But anyways, we're going to be moving on into our next clip inside the city, where we also saw the Ukrainians firing at the Russians in the distance in the city. See the buildings filled with smoke as a Ukrainian soldier looks outside with his PKP. We hear a bass-boosted explosion, a literal bass-boosted explosion right here. Man, did they sit there to the Wagner and go, no supply trucks?
Hey.
And then he starts laying down the fire on them. And that's the end of the clip, but once again, the 3rd Brigade in the city, giving them everything they've got, and hopefully pushing them back out. So with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip, and we're now going to be moving on down to the highway perimeter. You see, the highway perimeter is where all the fun's being had right now in the city of Bakhmut. And it appears that the fun didn't stop today. The Ukrainians are still sweeping Russians off the field as of right now. We can't really say where they are. That's a bit of an OPSEC issue. But they are still pushing forward from what we can tell. And so, our first clip is of the 93rd Brigade completely destroying Russian forces in the field. And we can see the remnants of the complete destruction of Russian forces. You can just see odds and ends of armored vehicles laying on the ground, the supply truck destroyed, an APC over to the right, another one to the left that you can hardly even tell is an APC anymore. It looks like an entire motor pool. I don't know why I said that like a New Yorker. I said it looked like a whole motor pool. But we can see the entire motor pool has been destroyed, and I gotta say, you know that if the fighting 93rds in that area, the Russians are going to be paying and a little extra, and it appears that they are paying a little bit extra. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip and on to the next one where we saw the Ukrainians storming Russian positions. Now, this says it's fighters of the 72nd Brigade stormed positions of the Russians. We don't know of any Ukrainian 72nd Brigade that is in this area. We know that the Ukrainians are attacking the Russian 72nd Brigade, and they are Ukrainian, as you'll see later on in the clip. But here's the video of the Ukrainians storming the position. You see them climbing it down to the trench, spraying the trench as they move up, nading outposts, and then, of course, waving the surrendering Russians forward. We can see the blue tape on them, showing that they are, in fact, Ukrainian soldiers. Oh, and we can see a little bit of lag there, but we can see them firing on down the trench and continuing to take it, moving their forces on, and of course capturing a prisoner. And I gotta say, the Ukrainians are doing an amazing job. Even today, they are still sweeping the Russians. We're moving on to our next clip in the area, where we saw a drone actually found a Russian who visibly wanted to surrender. The drone, instead of bombing him, dropped down instructions of what to do and guided him to an area where he could surrender. And so here's the clip. When you see the Russian soldier down there, he's trying to signal to the drone that he's not wanting to fight and he's wanting to surrender, as we can see right here. And he keeps on trying to show the drone an X mark with his hand, showing that he's not wanting to fight. And we can see him continuing to look up at the drone and showing that he does not want to fight. We can now see the Ukrainians loading up a packet onto the bottom of their drone that will give him written instructions on what to do to try and surrender. They're now loading it onto the bottom of the drone. And we can now see the drone flying out there. We can see the packet there on the ground. And we can see the Russian soldier crawling out of the trench very carefully and grabbing the package. He's now opening it and pulling out the sheet of paper. And he drops the piece of plastic that it was in, and he's looking at the instructions, and he looks back up the drone, because the letter actually tells him to follow the drone, and the drone will guide him to a surrender checkpoint. We now see him contemplating, maybe even hesitating to follow through on the instructions. You see him trying to do some hand signals to the drone, but now the drone is moving on, and the soldier is following right behind it. When you see the drone trying to urge him forward out of the trench, we now see him creeping his way on from trench to trench, past some other soldiers that appeared to have not really decided to surrender, but instead to fight it out, and it appears that they didn't get the good end of that stick. And we can see the Russian soldier continuing to follow the drone as the drone is coaxing him to move down the trench lines. We now see the Russian soldiers stopping for a moment and leaning onto the side of the trench, and then continuing onwards. It seems as though he may be wounded with the kind of progress he's making and his sluggish movements. But with that, that's the end of the clip, and at the end of it, he actually was led to a surrender checkpoint where the Ukrainians took him in and, of course, sent him to a prisoner of war camp. Very interesting to see, and I believe that is one of the first recorded instances of a Russian soldier giving up so quickly that the drone actually had to fly back out there and drop off surrender information to him instead of the other way around. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next clip, where we saw that the 3rd Brigade was able to capture even more Russians today. And so, here is that clip as well. Do you know what unit you are? What unit? Our unit. What they call Allah Azov in your unit. The 3rd Crimean Assault Brigade. They tell you that we are Azov. So, you are Azov now, as you say. They treat you badly. Take this part of the bus. Look, there's a car. You can drive straight, they will see you now. Take off your shoes. You will die. Can't feel my legs. Can we get rid of it? And that's the end of the clip. But we can see that the 3rd Brigade, otherwise known formerly as the Azov, took a few Russian soldiers as prisoner, and we can see that one of the guys may be wounded in some degree. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and into our next one, where we saw the 3rd Brigade kidding around today after the successful offensive began yesterday, because they're in pretty high spirits. So with that, here's the clip.
Yeah.
I and my young team. Tell us about the situation. Want to comment on the situation. We live in the swamp, in the spring. We are infantry. What can be? Thank you for not being Russian. You made my day in the Middle East. I don't really know what that means, but now you are laughing. And now you see them continuing to laugh as they march on down the boggy roads in the area around the canal, and that's the end of the clip. But I thought it was a funny one to show, because you could see that although they're embracing the suck, and it's terrible out there, the weather conditions are not improving, they still have very high spirits as this counteroffensive goes on. And they're kidding around about the terrible conditions as well, which shows you that they are in high spirits. Well, that we're now going to be moving behind the lines to an interesting sight. A video clip that I showed today during the short war summary, and it appears to show, at least according to the caption, that there is a column of Leopard 2 A4s that have been unloaded somewhere behind the lines of decent ways away from Bakhmut, but they're making their way to Bakhmut right now. At least that's what the caption suggests. So we gotta mute that. But we can see the column of Leopard 2s here. We can even see, interestingly enough, we can see a Leopard 2 A4 right here, but that one up there at the front, it either looks like a Leopard 2 PL, which is the Polish variant of the Leopard 2, or a Leopard 2 A5. We can't really tell which one it is, but we can see a more modern variant of the Leopard 2 up there. But we can see...
Gotta love the Poles.
You gotta love the Poles. You gotta love the Poles. You gotta love them in both ways. And you see the rest of the Leopard 2s coming up behind. And that's the end of the clip. But I like to see it. We love to see it. After we saw a Bradley the other day, we're now seeing leopards. How can it get any better than this? This is modern warfare. Or as a certain person would say, who was later found out to not be that great of a person, what you are seeing is advanced warfare. Anyways, The Battle of Bakhmut is going quite well, incredibly well for the Ukrainians at this point. The battle has turned around from what we can tell. The Russians are no longer the ones pushing forward. It's the Ukrainians that are the ones pushing forward, and the Russians are just about gas. They don't really have any more energy in them. They don't have any supplies. They don't have any ammo. So it's just a matter of waiting for the Ukrainians to push past them or push right onto them until they are either obliterated or they're forced to surrender. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the city of Bakhmut and on down into the direction of Orlivka, where we saw a video made by United 24 talking about anti-tank missiles being used in the Donbass. And so, without further ado, here's the clip.
This sector of the front line has remained almost unchanged since 2015. Russians are using the outskirts of the city of Donetsk to gather their assault troops and then advance...
Hold up. We've seen this clip before. It just hit me, like deja vu. I watched this clip before the stream. I actually watched this one, and it didn't hit me, but this is the one that's talking about the 59th. We've already seen this one. Sorry about that, everyone. We're going to be moving on from that clip. And further on down the lines, towards the area of Novoselivka Druha, where we saw an AA truck driving through the rain in some pretty decent mud. And so with that, here is the clip. We can see it's raining. And we can see the operators of the piece here just getting drenched in rain as the truck moves on. And I gotta be honest with you, Matthew. This kind of weather here is so bad. I think the original offensive window of early, mid-April to late May is most likely going to be pushed back into midsummer, because while we do see some kind of Ukrainian offensive happening in Bakhmut, this kind of weather is persistent across all the front lines for the past 2 weeks, and there is certainly no way that an offensive could begin with armor support due to this kind of foul weather. It's just not good.
Probably not. Before you click off of this, go back a little bit, because I want to see this guy's gloves again real quick.
This guy, that's a woman.
Well, woman.
So what gloves?
She'll show the gloves in a second. Let's see.
Those?
Hey, she's got my gloves.
Nice. All right.
That's the whole reason I required you to go back.
All right. Well, that's good to know. She's got your gloves. We always love to know that. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from Novoselivka Druha and on down towards the area of Marinka, where we saw a Russian trench getting obliterated in this area today.
Oh, okay.
Serenity now! And then we can see Russian get blown away. Actually, no, he's still there. He's running off. He's running right into the crater of the shell hole. And we can now see him hiding amongst the debris of all of the destroyed Russian vehicles. We now see this guy taking off his helmet and his vest. I don't know why. And throwing his hands up, actually. He's trying to surrender. He's moving past the destroyed Ukrainian car and on towards someone's position.
Man, that is not how you surrender. Jeez.
Man, that guy is scooting to be surrendering. It's like he's almost trying to charge him. But now he's still moving on. Still with his hands slightly up.
Dude's running like the boogeyman off of Scooby-Doo or something.
And now we can see him making it to the Ukrainian soldier, where he's now being processed as a prisoner. We can see the yellow armband right there showing it's Ukrainian soldiers. Now you can see an artillery shell explode right overhead, but they are still going to get the prisoner on out of there. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But even down in the area of Marinka, things are not going well for Russian forces. It's going so badly that now they'd rather choose to surrender than continue to fight. We're now going to be moving on down into the area of Volodar, where we saw that Madyar took out a high-end drone today. And of course, Madyar has been moved towards the Volodar area in general, but he was able to take out a $12,000 Matris M30T today.
Хто за кермом, уважно, обережно, вперед.
Зверху вони його можуть взяти.
And I believe that is the Matris that we're looking at right there.
Хто за кермом там? Хто за кермом нашого дрона, хлопці? Борода, давай обережно, так, щоб два...
Тільки в'їбаш його борода.
Єбаш. Як прийняв? Як прийняв? Все, їбаш.
Лопасті йому заїбаш парою лопастей, він точно впаде тоді. Паси за ним. Загубив?
А що ти думаєш?
Вон він і тебе. На 12 годину.
Бачить.
Дайте його голосніше, щоб
You can see the drone right there. We can see the Ukrainian drone coming down and lining itself up for a nice solid hit on this Russian drone. The Russian drone appears to be completely unaware of what's about to happen.
Ну, не попав би бомбою. Так тільки таранити треба. Скинуть не попав би, таранить треба. Таранити. Ну!
Oh!
Yes.
The camera's going out on the Ukrainian drone. Does it come back, though?
Твій дрон живий, просто гімбал йобаний. Тобто ти зараз летиш, ти повертаєшся.
Бери крапиву и ориентируйтесь и пробуйте хоть что-то там, хоть куда-то двигать. Может телеметрия появится.
Так я в нього гімбал зловив.
О, по телеметрии возвращайся назад, все. Давай, красавчик, тяни, друже. Это вообще будет пиздец какой-то.
В'їбали матрас, ще й повернулися додому.
We all hear them getting a laugh out of taking out that Matrix drone.
Пала висота до 50 метрів і втратився зв'язок через те, що радіогоризонту немає.
Ти свою роботу зробив, красавчик.
Але втрата борту на тобі.
До мене рапорт з ним.
Now we can see the replay here of them taking out the Matrix drone. I don't think the Ukrainian drone survived this, but even so, it was about a $1,500 drone taking out a nearly $15,000 drone. Well, actually $12,000 according to that. So it was a pretty decent exchange. For the price of about $1, they were able to take out $10 worth of damage. Well, better way to put that, for every dollar that the Ukrainians just spent taking out that drone, the Russians lost about 12. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that nice little clip near the Volodar area. Of course, Madiar keeping up the fun. And we're now going to be moving to the area of Staromanivka because we've seen the next level, Matthew. I guess you could say the next generation of Russian armor protection. Of course, the Russians, when we say the next generation, we actually mean the next generation backwards instead of forwards, because they don't really go forwards anymore. They're going to the Stone Age. And we can see that they're well on their way and they've reached the Iron Age right here. And this is the best protection they can now provide for an advanced Russian main battle tank.
Oh, they discovered how to make a canopy.
Yeah, it's an Eno hammock that's been put on upside down. And we can also see that they took the, I guess you could say the gates that are used at a cattle ranch, and they put those on the side of the T-62. So they're getting there. They're going backwards in time, but they're getting there nonetheless. I think they'll probably be getting to the Bronze Age soon, and they'll start to, I guess you could say, have a hard time making paper and also writing things down. And we can also see that they put ERA tiles on the side of the turret, so that way if there are any Russian soldiers standing nearby and this thing gets hit, it not only kills the crew, it kills the infantry right outside the tank too. But yeah, they are getting really bad off at this point. No bones about it. This kind of stuff shows that they're desperate for anything at that point. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from Staromanivka and on down the line and into the area just south of Melitopol near Yakimivka. We saw that the Russians made a little monument in Yakimivka for Victory Day, and it was very reminiscent of something else. Now, I would like to say we are going to be showing a little thing, a little symbol, that was known in Germany during the 1930s and 40s. We're showing this for educational and historical purposes, really documentary purposes, because it is very reminiscent to what the Russians did inside of Yakimivka just yesterday. And so here's the picture. We can see that they laid out some candles in front of a monument that said Победы, which means victory, and then a big Z in red. And someone was smart enough to make the comparison in between the Germans in the 30s and the 40s and what the Russians did there. Of course, the Russians don't have enough money for torches because, you know, the Nazis, they used torches, but they still did it in candles nonetheless. And you gotta say, the similarities there are striking.
Look at the difference in scale, too. There's only like 20 people in the background, and the other one's massive. It's like a lot of people involved in that one.
Yeah, but even still, while it may only be 20 people, they're still trying to emulate that exact same sick, twisted, I guess you could say, nature of the thousands of Nazis that we can see in the bottom picture. And pretty wild to see they're doing things that the Nazis did down to a T at this point. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little picture pretty bizarre to see, and once again reminding us what the Ukrainians are really fighting against. While the Russians want to call them the Nazis, I haven't seen the Ukrainians doing Nazi stuff like that. And so we're now going to be moving on to the area of Kherson, right on the southern banks, where we saw the Ukrainians destroying some Russian guns today. And also, we're going to have to mute Hell to Pay. Sadly, we watch Hell to Pay every day. But we can see the Ukrainian artillery landing near the Russian artillery. And we're now waiting for the smoke to clear to see what kind of damage has been put onto the Russian guns here. And we haven't seen any fires get started yet. But I'm sure we'll be seeing a second shell land here in a minute. We can see it right there. And that one appears to have landed really close to the artillery piece. The artillery piece is covered with a camouflage net about right there. And the Ukrainians had some really keen eyes to see this thing, because you can hardly even tell there is an artillery piece that's there. They're now hitting it a third time. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But they were able to take out a whole 2 D-20 guns on the southern banks of the Kherson River today. And while it's not really necessary to take out Russian forces here, it is good to know that they are still whittling down Russian forces wherever they may be. Because these units in the Kherson area, they're most likely in a reserve position at this point. They're not going to be expected to engage in any fighting. They're going to be expected, if needed, to move to other areas in Ukraine and try and help the Russians to defend those areas. And knowing that they're taking losses means that the reserve forces that the Russians can pull up if the Ukrainians do conduct a breakthrough offensive are going to be worse off than they would have been otherwise. And so with that, we've now covered all of the news, north to south, east to west, throughout all of Ukraine today. And we're now going to be moving on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 441 of the war in Ukraine. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech! And here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Коротко про сьогоднішній день, про наші дії. Наш міжнародний блок дуже активно в деталях працює з партнерами заради нових оборонних пакетів для України. Нові рішення вже на робочому рівні. Більше захисту для нашого неба, більше можливостей для нашої оборони та руху на землі. Провів сьогодні кілька нарад, де ми все це обговорювали і очікуємо вже найближчим часом відповідних кроків від партнерів. Ані на хвилину не забуваємо, що кожен день присутності окупанта на нашій землі – це спокуса для нього думати, нібито йому щось вдасться. Нічого йому не вдасться. Маємо повернути свободу, безпеку і Європу на всю українську землю, на всю європейську землю. Ми це зробимо. Не залишимо ворогу жодного клаптика нашої землі, ніде тиранія не пануватиме. І я дякую лідерам-партнерам, усім державам-партнерам, кожному і кожній, хто нам допомагає зміцнювати нашу силу та робити українську оборону ще активнішою. Провів сьогодні достатньо змістовну нараду з урядовцями щодо програм відновлення нашої території та українського життя після бойових дій та війни загалом. Ми опрацьовуємо всі аспекти відновлення, і кожен з них у новому безпековому форматі. Економіка та промисловість, ОПК, енергетика, інфраструктура, освітня галузь, соціальна сфера, медицина, зокрема реабілітаційний компонент. Все те, що має бути побудовано, те, у що готовий інвестувати світ, те, що дасть Україні і українцям надійний захист і впевнений розвиток нашого соціального капіталу. Зараз, протягом травня, допрацьовуємо конкретні пункти цих державних програм і вже у червні вийдемо на практичну роботу з партнерами щодо наших планів. Того, що стосується як відбудови тут і зараз критичних систем, так і стратегічної трансформації нашої країни. Впевнений, наш проєкт відбудови дасть поштовх для розвитку, як мінімум, усьому нашому регіону, услід за Україною та усім нашим партнерам, хто буде співпрацювати з Україною. Саме тут, в Україні, світ бачитиме, на що здатна Європа. Тут у нас, в Україні, буде максимум Європи в Європі. Максимум можливого із того, на що здатні європейські цінності, на що здатна європейська і глобальна співпраця. Крок за кроком, на основі тих ресурсів, які маємо зараз, реалізовуємо і програми поточного відновлення нашої країни. Зокрема, сьогодні запрацював державний сервіс є відновлення. Це підтримка людей, які потребують ремонту будинків або квартир після пошкоджень війною. Вже за цей день ми маємо значну кількість заявок у дії. Загалом йдеться про сотні тисяч пошкоджених об'єктів. Причому ми маємо відпрацювати це завдання і щодо тих наших людей, хто зміг своїми силами відновити пошкоджене житло. Рівність у допомозі – це дуже-дуже важливо, і відповідний алгоритм потрібен. Наступний крок – відшкодування за втрачене житло. І це буде. Звичайно, протягом дня спілкувався із нашими командувачами, з керівниками розвідки. Ситуація на передовій – очевидний перший пріоритет. Підписав сьогодні і нові укази про відзначення наших воїнів державними нагородами. 10-та окрема гірсько-штурмова бригада, 14-та, 28-та, 53-та, 59-та, 72-га окремі механізовані бригади, 3-та окрема штурмова бригада, 27-ма реактивна артилерійська бригада, 112-та окрема бригада ТРО, 67-й окремий стрілецький батальйон, 65-й військовий мобільний госпіталь, це Лиманський напрямок, Бахмут, Часів Яр, Авдіївський напрямок, Шахтарський. Загалом сьогоднішніми указами відзначені 266 наших захисників і захисниць. Найхоробріші, найдостойніші ті, чиї життя є життям України. Нашої прекрасної та незламної України. Слава усім нашим воїнам, які зараз в бою, на бойових постах та в бойових завданнях. Слава кожній українській родині, яка виховала таких синів і доньок. Слава Україні!
Героям слава! And Slava Ukraini. And that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on the 441st day of the war, and that rounds out our news summary for tonight as well. I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolute honor for me to know that a lot of y'all have found this to be a quality source of news, and if you did, and this is your first time watching, I ask that you do subscribe, because it means a lot to us. It puts a smile on our face to know that people enjoy this channel enough that they would find it worthwhile to subscribe and let YouTube notify them when we run these streams. And you can always count on us to be here 6 days a week, every single day except for Monday at the exact same time of 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We cover the news of the war in Ukraine in video and picture evidence over a 24-hour window, 6 days a week. And when we take our day off on Monday and come back on Tuesday, you can count on us to cover the whole 48 hours of the war that happened on both Monday and Tuesday as well. And so, with that, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd be more than appreciative. And I thank everyone so much once again for watching our news segment and, of course, sticking with us into the question segment, because we're going to be getting to that in just a second. Just in case if we have any new viewers, because we have had a massive audience tonight. Our audience at the highest tonight was 7,500 people in the live audience at a single time. And in case if you are new, I would like to explain to you all how our question segment works. Our channel works off of a premise of it being absolutely free if you want it to be. You do not have to spend a single second watching an ad. You do not have to watch a sponsor as well in the video. You don't have to figure out how long it is, the sponsor segment is, to skip it. We don't run any ads or any sponsors on anything. Our channel is run entirely through voluntary donations from our viewers, and if the viewers enjoy our channel and they want to support us, they get to decide how much they want to support us, if at all. And so we always want to make sure to put those people first, because they're the only way we're able to do this as a job. And so we answer all of the super chats, which you can see, I think 2 of them right now in the live chat. We answer all of those super chats first, and then we get to the live chats, because once again, you do not have to pay a single cent to watch the channel. You don't even have to pay a single cent to have a question answered. But if you do support the channel, we always make sure to address those first and thank those folks for helping this channel to keep on running. And so, with that, we're now going to be moving on into that question segment, but before we get to the questions, we have to, of course, address those polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our very first poll says, Ukrainian forces have conducted successful counterattacks after Russian forces flee from Bakhmut. And what are your thoughts? 82% said excellent, and this is the beginning of the end. 9% said unsure, 8% said I'm mixed on it, and 2% said bad, it's likely a trap. And I seriously doubt it is a trap. It sounds like the Russians are just fleeing on their own. I'm not sure exactly if it's because of the ammo shortages or is it because they're just cowards. But Enforcer will let us know about that in a moment. But I think it's excellent and probably a sign of the end for the Russians there in Bakhmut, which is quite a turnaround. But Enforcer, what say you?
And can you reread that poll prompt again?
It says Ukrainian forces have conducted successful counterattacks after Russian forces flee from Bakhmut. And thoughts?
I would say that it is probably the sign of the end of the war as far as it goes for Russia. They can still try and conduct offensives beyond this point, but they'll never be successful. They'll be similar to like the Ardennes offensive that the Germans pulled off in 1944 to 1945. It's not going to be any kind of successful offensive, but they could try and pull one nonetheless. This is the end, though, because we've seen up till this point that the Russians lost every single offensive they've ever tried to pull off at some scale. At the beginning of the war, they lost the entire northern area. Later on in the war, they lost the Balaklia direction. They lost Kherson. They've lost pretty much anything that really matters at this point, and they hold on to a small amount that's left. Mariupol, Donetsk, Luhansk, Melitopol, and Crimea. And from what we can tell, also on top of that, the offensive scope of the Russians has continued to decrease as well. At the beginning of the war, it was the entirety of Ukraine. Then it went to the southern area. Then it went to just specifically the southeastern area, and then after that it turned into the single city of Bakhmut, and that was it. And at this point, they've exhausted all of their options. If they were to try and conduct an offensive at this point, and if we were looking at the scale at which their offensive, if we're looking at the scale their offensives are shrinking at, the next time they conduct an offensive, the biggest offensive they will be able to pull off is going to be for a small village or a series of fields in the middle of nowhere, because that's about where they're at right now. So I would say that there's certainly no way in hell that the Russians will be able to go on beyond this point. It is the end of times for the Russians, and this war will be coming to an end probably here within a year. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one says Zelenskyy has stated that the counteroffensive will happen, but he denied it has already started. And what are your thoughts? It looks like 41% said he's deceiving the Russians, 12% said unsure, 40% said preparations are still ongoing, and 7% said it has certainly started already. And I see some folks saying that they think it's already started before, but I will say that if Zelenskyy is saying it really hasn't started yet, I would probably say that preparations are still ongoing. And given the fact that Italy has just warned its citizens to get out of Ukraine quickly, it probably hasn't started yet, or that warning would be way, way too late. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it probably hasn't happened yet either, because while the Ukrainians are steamrolling the Russians in Bakhmut right now and pushing them back, that's just the weirdest place for an offensive to occur. And I'm not saying that it's not the offensive. We could find out in a few days that is the offensive, and then watch it blow through the Russian lines and take the city of Bakhmut back. It's just that it would be weird to do that, though, because there isn't really any strategic implication behind Bakhmut. There's just a tactical implication behind it. So it doesn't really make a lot of strategic sense to try and retake that town, because there's so many other places that have so much more potential. Like the northeastern area, for example, towards Starobilsk. That has a lot of potential. Or the southern front towards Melitopol or Mariupol. That also has a large amount of potential as well. And I don't know why they would try and start their offensive at Bakhmut if this really is it. So I would have to say, in my honest opinion, this is probably just an appetizer for the offensive that is coming up, and it's going to be somewhere else. So with that, I hope that does...
It's a pre-offensive, as Red 1967 said.
Yeah, a pre-offensive, or it may be a diversion to make them think that, well, I already said it now. It may be a diversion to make the Russians think that an offensive is happening here, but instead the offensive is happening somewhere else in the northeast or to the south, or even towards Kherson. That's something that the United States did. Really the Allies did as a whole during the Second World War, is that they were always trying to conduct some kind of a deception on the Axis powers to make them think that they were going to be doing one thing and then they do a complete other. Look at the Ghost Army in southeastern England that made the Germans think that the Allies would land at Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. Or look at Operation Mincemeat that made the Germans think that the Allied forces would land in Greece. And instead of landing in Greece, they landed in Sicily in 1943. There's loads of examples where that kind of deception has gone on. Sometimes it's not really with any direct military action that makes them think it's going to happen in one direction. Sometimes, most of the time, in both of those examples, it was just through raw deception. But in this example, it may be that they're creating a diversion by causing a small counteroffensive in Bakhmut as well. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says the U.S. has approved the first transfer of Russian forfeited funds to Ukraine, and what are your thoughts? Looks like an overwhelming 91% said excellent, and that's a great precedent to set. 5% said unsure, 2% said it depends on how much, and 3% said bad, there was no due process. And just in case you're curious, I believe it was in the amount of a few $1,000,000, so it wasn't a massive amount of money in the scheme of things, but it still is a good start. I would say it's a great precedent to set. It doesn't seem like there was much due process, but at the same time, the Russians didn't give Ukraine due process when they decided to unjustly invade their land. So why should we afford the Russians the same thing? So I agree with it 100%, and I think it's a good start. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. I think it's a great start. Not a large amount of money, but it is certainly a step in the right direction, and may just be something to show the theory that it is possible to do and probably lead to more relinquishings of funds in the future from seized Russian assets. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. We are on to the next one.
And the fourth one says, Japan believes that the Ukraine war has made the world unstable, and they have concerns about World War III, and they're ramping up their military spending. And what are your thoughts? 63% said it's a justified concern and very possible. 3% said unsure. 11% said I'm mixed on it. And 23% said that this won't result in world war. And I think the concern is justified. Japan should, of course, raise their military spending to go ahead and prepare for the worst. You don't want to get caught off guard in case something did break out, but I still think it's unlikely at this point. It looks like China has sort of backed off its Taiwan situation slightly. It's not going all in like it was, so that's a good sign. But there's still really high tensions around the world right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the Japanese do have a valid concern as far as that goes. It does show that the world is certainly escalating in tensions, and for the Japanese, it's a huge concern for them, considering that they are the third largest economy in the world. That's still crazy to really think and say about, is that they are the third largest economy behind China and the United States. That's really weird.
Wild.
Yeah, that's really wild when you think about it. They have an economy that's 6 times larger than Russia's.
That's crazy, really.
Yeah, that is crazy when you think about it, and it puts them in a major position in the East Asian world because they have a large amount of spending power, especially compared to all of the other countries in the area except for China. And so, if anything happens in East Asia, it's most likely going to fall on them in the United States to take care of it, and most likely the South Koreans as well. But the South Koreans really more so are just focused on the peninsula instead of the entire East Asian area. That would most likely be their realm of concern. So I would say that the Japanese are certainly not wrong in that idea, and that it would be necessary or even well advised to start building up their military forces. We already have seen that they've started working on their own aircraft carrier, and they've also revoked the article inside of their constitution that allowed them to only use their military and defensive purposes. So I think those are 2 steps in the right direction, and hopefully we'll see the Japanese rearm and have some teeth, so that way if anything does happen in East Asia, they will also be ready for it. And I gotta say, when you really think about the history of Japan and how they went from an isolationist country and then jumping into the world in about the 1850s and 60s and now being the 3rd largest economy in the world, that has got to be one of the craziest success stories that a single country has heard in the modern world.
It is wild, I gotta say.
Yeah, because
I see some folks saying that's not wild. Look at history, but you gotta admit though, they are one of the biggest powerhouses in the world right now, and it's just an island.
And that is insane. I mean, when you really think about it, their economy right now is twice the size of the United Kingdom's. And the United Kingdom used to control an empire that held a quarter of the world's landmass under its control. And right now, in 2023, the Japanese economy is about twice the size of the UK's. It's really crazy when you think about something like that. And also what's crazy, if you really think about history, is that they went from being a near feudal society in 1850 to just about 150 years down the road, they are one of the most advanced and wealthiest countries in the world. And they really don't have a lot of natural resources to speak of in Japan, like iron or steel, that would have helped them to do that on their own. I mean, the mastery of them being able to get to that point from a feudal society in 1850 to the third wealthiest country in the world today by GDP is actually really crazy when you think about it. But then again, that's also putting behind South Korea, because South Korea went from being a peasant-like, nearly feudal country in 1950 to being one of the most advanced and wealthiest countries in East Asia per capita today. So, South Korea more so is a success story due to the amount of time that they modernized and everything else, but still, Japan's a crazy, interesting country historically. Every country's interesting, but Japan is really interesting in that regard.
What's even crazier is something that people really hasn't realized yet is countries like Japan and Germany that were pretty much demilitarized after World War II was over. They're all starting to heavily remilitarize and rebuild their militaries back to those, pre-World War II strengths. Japan's probably going to do it. Germany's already in the process, and you're probably going to see all the rest of them following suit.
Probably so. I would not doubt it at all. And also, one thing that's probably led to the great economic success of Japan is that for a large part of the past 70 years, they never really had to focus on defense like most countries would, because the United States practically guaranteed their defense and was their armed forces for a good while. But ever since around the 1980s, they've really started to get back into military rearmament, and I think it's a great step for the Japanese. So with that, and here's one thing I'll say as to why I think it's a great step. It's better to have strong allies than allies that always constantly rely on one nation for their defense. That's what the Soviets did, and that was a disaster as far as the Warsaw Pact was concerned, and we've been doing that around the world for a good while, and I say as long as we're on great terms with countries, I think it's better to encourage them to be strong in every aspect, to be strong along with us, than encouraging everyone to not really have any military or any weaponry for that matter, and then we just provide the defense for everyone else. I think it's great to know that the Japanese are going down that path, and hopefully we'll have a strong partner to help us out in the East Asian area here in the future. And so with that, we are on to the next one. I hope we addressed that poll fairly well.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we are going to move into our super chats. But first, we forgot to call out something the other night. We got 2 pieces of fan mail. We got the tank that Jesus UCSB said he was going to send us, and we also got some really cool historical documents from Madison music teacher who lives right here in Alabama, of all places. So big shout out to you two, and also Jesus wanted us to show the video I made and sent to him of the tank in the model case.
And so let me get that up here real quick. So here's Matthew's model case, just in case you're all wondering, whose is this? This is Matthew's. Matthew's big into models. But here is the clip. And this is Jesus UCSB's M1 Abrams that he sent to us in the mail.
Hey, Jesus, it's Enforcer Matt. I just want to send you a video because we just got your tank model, and I just want to show you my model case here. I've got an SR-71 down here at the bottom, Blackbird, along with the Airbus back there. But that's beside the point, because we got your tank. And it looks super cool, man. It fits in this model case wonderfully. It looks wonderful under the light, super detailed. I'm like impressed to see this thing in person. And I just want to say thank you so much for sending it, because this is right up our alley, and this is going to go on the podcast set. But I put it here for now because we still have to reattach one machine gun. It fell off up there at the top when it was in transit. So we're going to get that fixed and then put that on the podcast set. But big thanks to you, man. That was extremely generous, and it'll be in very good hands. As you can see here, it looks great in this model case. But big thanks, man, and we'll catch you on the stream.
And that's a little clip of Jesus UCSB's model tank finally making it here. And it was so cool we actually had to make a video and show it to y'all, because it is one hell of a model right there. We were blown away with it when we saw it. And it looks great right now. It's in Matthew's office behind him right now. It's not on our set yet, but it will be next time we go live. And I want to thank Jesus UCSB for sending that once again. It was actually made by someone he knew, a friend of his in Vilseck, Germany, and he gave it to him as a gift. And it means a lot to Jesus UCSB, and I want to thank you so much for sending that to us, because it is a high honor to think that you would find us deserving enough of that model, and it is one hell of a quality model as well. The guy who made it really put in a lot of effort and sweat, especially into the diorama it sits on. I was really impressed with that, because I'm also a model maker, and I've made some models. I actually made it into the Tamiya semifinals in 2016, I think, for one of the months. And it was an impressive model. I got to say, it was actually well above my abilities when I made models. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Jesus UCSB. And also, thank you to, isn't it JC the Music Man?
It's Madison Music Teacher.
Why in the world did I get that wrong? There's music in both of their names, but I want to thank Madison Music's teacher for sending that CD as well, because that was also really neat too. And so with that, we are on to, I think, the questions now, if I'm correct.
And yes, we are. We're moving on to our Super Chat questions, and our very first one goes to Mark, Colonel of the LSA yet again. He puts in a $50 Super Chat this time, and thank you, Mark, for the continuous support. He says, I hear that the Russian T-55s were modernized, and do you know how? They changed the 1950s oil to 2009 oil, question mark.
Thank you for the support, Mark. And that's probably what they mean by modernize them. There's not really many ways they can. I've heard that they've tried to put on some kind of a cheap IR site onto these tanks, but I've never seen any proof of that on a T-55. I've only seen proof of that on a few T-62Ms. So I think that you may be right. While that may be a joke, I think you may be correct. What they did by quote-unquote modernizing them is maybe taking out some of the old stuff, like the suspension that's completely shot because it's like 70 years old at this point, and replacing it with some new suspension or something like that. It couldn't have been anything incredibly advanced. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. That is your second support of the night, and I gotta thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running, because folks like you make this stream possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Alan Will 2, who puts in a $25 super chat. And thank you very much, Alan, for the support. And he says, y'all rock. And he doesn't put the rock emoji behind it.
And I thank you so much for the support and saying we rock, because we indeed rock at Gibraltar. I mean, like, that is a rock. Have you ever seen the Rock at Gibraltar, Matthew? I know you have.
Yes,
you play
yes, I have. I fly into that airport all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're flying in an airport all the time. That is. If we rock, I want to be Rock at Gibraltar Rock, because that's a big rock. And they also have a little weather station on top of it. Huh. But still, that's one hell of a rock. And I also thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you who enjoy this channel enough to support us, you make it possible for us to do everything we do. And we thank you so much. And we're also highly honored that people find this channel worthwhile supporting, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to do this as a job. And so thank you so much once again for all the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again.
All right, and the next one goes to Ian Appling, who puts in a $20 super chat. And thank you, Ian, very much for the support. And he says that old national anthem is bussin'. Leaf Spring Army is out in force. And here's to hoping that we have a few Bobcat skid steers to add to the tally, and Slava Ukraini. And we had one.
And we did have one. And I thank you so much for the support. And I got to be honest with you, Vanilla RPG Soundtrack's anthem was great. But the OG anthem, I don't think I've never found an anthem that tops that rendition of the Ukrainian anthem. It's the best one out there. And I don't know how in the world this one's okay for us to run, but it is for some reason, because nothing happened to last night's stream because we ran that anthem. And so we're able to run it again. I think that's amazing. I love it. And also, I'm glad to know that some people also enjoy the return of that anthem, because this channel was pretty much brought about with that anthem. It was here for like 200 days or so, and then it had to go because there were some problems with it. Not any problems with what the anthem was composed of, but more so a problem with some, well, I don't want to call them anything in particular, but some silly people with a certain group who came and said it was their song, although it was not. So then they started going back and having every single stream copyrighted, which, you know, shouldn't have been, because I don't even think they have the rights to the music, actually. I think it's another guy. And then on top of that, he's never come down himself and done anything about that song. And so, you know, we had to stop using it, and we had to go get another one. And Vanilla RPG Soundtracks put in time and effort into that anthem that we've been using. And he did an amazing job, but the OG one is back, and I think it's great. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from none other than Cindy Mitchell. And thank you, Cindy, very much for the support. And she says, there is information that Russian soldiers are fleeing Zaporizhia in disguise.
I wouldn't doubt that at all. Now, desertions and going AWOL, that's no question at all. That is happening. Probably not in incredibly large numbers, like units aren't disappearing off the map because of it, but the Russians are probably starting to notice that there is a decent amount of guys who are missing from their units because they've gone AWOL or they're fleeing or deserting. So I would not doubt that at all. And while we don't have any video or picture evidence to back that up, I would say that's probably a reality. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And the next one goes to Martin. I believe it is said Hog, although I'm not sure if it's Haig. But Martin, hopefully I'm not butchering your last name, but thank you very much for the $20 support. And his super chat says, any chance that Ukraine is looking at using flame-throwing armored vehicles on the front lines to drive the orcs out of their holes?
Interesting question. I would say the chances of that are kind of low. We haven't really seen a lot of incendiaries, at least by the Ukrainians, being used in this war. We have seen them start to use thermobaric grenades, but we haven't really seen anything beyond that. The Russians are the ones who like to use thermobarics or anything close to an incendiary like white phosphorus, but I don't think the Ukrainians will be using any kind of flame-throwing tanks. If they wanted to do something like that, they probably also would be looked at with a side eye by most Western countries, because most Western countries have largely abandoned any kind of incendiary warfare. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Martin, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope I addressed that question fairly well, at least in my opinion. They may do something like that, but I feel like it will most likely be unlikely. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Marion Deemer. And thank you, Marion, for the support. And Marion says, F yourself.
Oh, it's talking about the Russian warship. Well,
yes.
Thank you so much for
I was going to let that sit for a minute and see what you thought about it.
And I thank you so much for the support. And F yourself. But still, thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And I forgot what it's called. I forgot the exact phrase. It's like Russiski, Ruski, Bonia, Krosati, or something like that. But I do thank you so much once again for the support. And that Russian warship did go and F itself. And it's funny to think the irony of that is that that was the ship at Snake Island that got sunk like in May of last year. And it was the Moskva. I love it. I love to see it, honestly. Actually, I think it was sunk in April. It was like the 50th or 60th day of the war. But still, great nonetheless. And I remember those days. For some reason, Matthew, the sinking of the Moskva feels like it happened like last month. Like, for some reason, like, I remember the early parts of the war so well because I think it was all new and really, like, crazy to me. Like, it felt like I was living in a dream at that point with how this thing was running and how everything was going back then. So I just remember everything like that so well that it feels like a month ago still.
Everything was just moving so fast. Like, that happened. It felt like things were just going, like, back to back to back. Like, the Moskva sinking was a huge event. But it does feel like it just happened yesterday.
Yeah, and then remember that the Omsk was sunk in Berdyansk just a little bit before that, like on the 20th something day of the war, and the Omsk was sunk here at this mooring.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's like crazy to think, because I remember all that stuff, and I remember the fights around Kharkiv and the fights outside of Kyiv, and how the Russians were moving around and they ran into the witches at Konotop, you know, that were saying all that crazy stuff that they were going to make sure that their stuff down under didn't work, you know, all that stuff. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and it's so weird because everything feels like it happened yesterday, but it's been 441 days. It's insane, really. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. It also go down a little bit of a rabbit hole about how weird it feels like everything just happened yesterday. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and our next one goes to Thomas Peltison, who puts in a very generous $100 donation, and thank you very much, Thomas, for the support. And he says, how reliable are the reports of the Russian casualties? Are there any hints on corresponding Ukrainian casualties? And thanks for the great job.
And thank you so much for enjoying the great job we do, Thomas. And now I don't want to say it's great, because that sounds really narcissistic, but I do thank you so much for saying it's a great job. Are there, let's see, and the question is, how reliable are the reports of Russian casualties? Up until recently, there had been some questions that the Ukrainian casualty reports, the ones that we use from the Kyiv Independent, is unreliable or inaccurate. But these are gathered from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and then the Kyiv Independent puts it into their own infographic, and then they put it up on Twitter. We thought that there was probably a margin of error here with these loss reports, But at the same time, the Ministry of Defense also puts out information about how many losses they think the Wagner unit has taken in Bakhmut. And up until recently, those numbers were so high, nobody really believed them. They were somewhere in the number of like the Wagner's lost 30 to 40,000 soldiers. And going off of the original number, the force size that they had going into the war, that was somewhere around like 200% of their forces that had been lost in Bakhmut. And a lot of people didn't believe that. But recently, just a few days ago, Prigozhin came out and said that he actually broke down the loss rate of the Wagner unit and said that they had lost around 30 to 40,000 soldiers in Bakhmut. And that wasn't that long. It was about, I think, 2 weeks after the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense came out with that kind of number. And that was refuted at the moment by the Russians. They said that the Wagner had not taken casualties to that degree at all. And then 2 weeks later, Prigozhin came out and stated that as a fact, and stated that it was in fact true, that they had been killed over that badly. In fact, 170% of their unit had been killed, which is incredibly high by any standards. And so if we're going off of that and seeing that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense was true in their reports about how many casualties the Wagner unit had been taking in Bakhmut, and then that was corroborated by the leader of the Wagner unit, I would say that the casualty reports that the Ukrainians have been making about the Russian army at large, like the one we're seeing right here, it also has to be fairly accurate. Now, it's probably off by a few thousand, because this is, of course, an approximation being made by a very complex communication system of commanders in the field recording and observing the deaths of Russian soldiers, and then that goes up the chain until they eventually add all of the losses up over the day, and then they put it down in a sheet like this. So I would say that these numbers are probably accurate, probably with the margin of error in the few thousands. Probably at the lowest, probably somewhere around 180,000 Russian soldiers killed, or the number may even be higher. It may be past 200,000 at this point. But I would say that this is a very good estimate to go off of as to how many Russian soldiers have been killed, based off of how accurate the Ministry of Defense was in reporting the losses of the Wagner unit.
And I'm not sure if you've gone over it already, but J.C. Atkins made a good point. He said casualties is typically referred to as killed and wounded. And what is this figure that we're looking at?
I believe that what they're showing right here is the number killed alone. Because there was a website that we used to go to, and I'm trying to think of it, Matthew. What was the name of it? It was the one that was the...
Minus Rus?
Yeah, Minus Rus. Here, Minus Rus. Because Minus Rus goes off of the idea... We'll get on the website real quick and I'll show it. Minus Rus goes off of the idea that these are killed soldiers that we see on the
600,000 wounded. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so, you know, the wounded, we don't even really know where Minus Rus is getting that number, so I don't think it's that accurate, to be honest with you. But they're going off of a ratio of killed to wounded, because there's usually some kind of a mathematical ratio that is a given constant in a war in between the killed and the wounded. Usually, for every killed soldier, there's about 3 wounded. So they're coming up with, I think, a ratio of like 3 to 1, and that's how they get their wounded number. But according to what Minus Rus is going off of, these are killed Russian soldiers that the Ministry of Defense is reporting per day, and they're not including the wounded.
So wait a minute. Go back to the Minus Rus website for a minute. Are they saying on that figure on the right, 87.2%, that's the amount that have been debilitated that can't fight?
They may be, but that, I kind of take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because with the wounded, you know, like, for example, American soldier can get a grazing shot in combat that gives him a flesh wound, and technically he's wounded in combat, and he's marked as a casualty if he ever has to go to like an aid station or anything like that to be treated for his wounds. That gets marked as a casualty. Then, you know, at the same time in the casualties, you can have a guy whose leg was blown off and he's taken out of the service because he's now an amputee, and they're both considered a casualty. So, you know, like
there's no way that 87% have been knocked out. I know Russia's losing without a doubt, but 87%, that seems a little bit overestimated.
But this number is not overestimated, because we do have like picture and video evidence to back up how many tanks the Russians have lost, and they have lost over 100% of their initial armor forces that they had at the beginning of the war. That we do know. But it's
wait a minute. They said they had 3,300 to begin with, and they've lost 3,700.
Yeah, because you got to remember they're introducing a lot of old tanks like T-62Ms and T-55s that weren't actually a part of their active tank forces at the start of the war. So now they're starting to get destroyed, and so the number's gone past 100%, and they've lost over 100% at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that one's a pretty funny one to look at. It's like, well, they lost them all, and now they're losing extra more. But anyways,
They probably should have counted the antique ones as well, because if they were good enough to use in battle and they operate, then wouldn't they be considered, a part of their fleet?
well, yeah, not really, because like, would you consider a broken down car that you can possibly repair a part of UPS? UPS's delivery service, or is it more so just sitting in a like auto wrecker yard, unusable for the most part?
Well, I doubt the Russians had to rebuild it from the ground up. They probably just had to do maintenance on them to get them back to working order, but they weren't like, done for or anything like that.
No, that's not true. I mean, there's a lot of videos out there of them having to take the T-62s and T-55s to tank factories because they're in such bad shape. They have to replace the entire suspension on them, the engines, everything pretty much. That nothing in those T-55s, at least mechanically, is old. The only thing that's old about them is their hull and their turret and the guns as well. Everything else is within their ability, they pretty much have to make new because it's so old that it's either pretty much rotted or is completely unusable.
Interesting. I don't doubt that Russia's losing. I want to make that clear, because I know somebody's going to say in a minute that I'm trying to defend the Russians, but these numbers to me seem extremely high, and they seem like they're just kind of wishful thinking, but I'm sure there's probably some truth to it.
Well, I gotta ask you this, Matthew. If this was wishful thinking, how come we saw no tanks at the Victory Day parades anywhere in Russia?
They could be mobilized, getting ready for their counteroffensive when the Ukrainians kick it off.
Yeah, how are they going to do that when they can't even conduct a Bakhmut city offensive? They hardly have any tanks active there. They can't even run that offensive.
Because we see the Russians are preparing for failure. For example, they're going way behind the front lines to build trench lines. They're going back there and reinforcing really, really far back positions instead of preparing to push forward or defend right at the front line, because they know that the Ukrainians are going to punch through. So they probably don't have their best stuff up at the front. And when I say best stuff, I mean their old antiques.
Well, I mean, I got to be honest with you. I think these numbers down here are almost spot on accurate. These, however, including the wounded, I don't know if the wounded number's accurate or not, because that's largely guesswork. But the killed number is mostly accurate. That's what I would say. So with that, I hope that does answer that part of the question fairly well. Moving on to the other one about corresponding Ukrainian casualties, we've never gotten an official number from the Ukrainian government. The Russians say that they've killed, I saw someone from the U.S. today on the news. It was a small clip. They were a person in the U.S. government who claimed that we had gotten 300,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed so far in the war, and it appears that they were citing a number made by the Russian government, and that is markedly untrue, because that means the entire Ukrainian army is dead. And obviously they're not, otherwise they wouldn't be still holding the lines and conducting a counteroffensive as we see right now. And on top of that, that means that everyone we've known so far would be dead. Mustache Man would be dead, Magyar would be dead, everyone would be dead, because 100% of the army is dead. Well, in fact, it would be 100,000 plus another 30,000, because at the beginning of the war, the Ukrainian army was only 270,000 strong. So we know that their numbers are untrue, but the Ukrainians don't come out with one of their own. But we guesstimate, and this is a very strong guesstimate, that their losses are somewhere around 40,000 to 50,000. But that is a very large guesstimate, because we don't really have anything to work with to make that number. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Thomas. Now, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
Indeed. And up next, we have another $30 super chat from Thomas Peltison yet again. And thank you, Thomas, for the support. And he says, are the Russian casualty figures reliable? And how, I think that's the same one he sent in before. Let's see. Yeah, he sent in the same question again.
Let's see, are Russian casualty figures reliable?
And how about the Ukrainian casualties? I think that's the part he wants to know about.
The Ukrainian casualties, we don't really have a hardcore number to work with, because the Ukrainians don't release one, and we know that the Russian one is wildly inaccurate, because they also say that they've destroyed HIMARS and Leopards, but we've never seen any physical proof of them destroying a HIMARS or a Leopard. No proof has been shown of that, so it's just false, and also the Russians are known to lie about everything, so we can't really go off of their numbers either. So we guess that there's somewhere around 40 to 50,000, but once again, that's a very strong guess. So with that, Thank you so much once again for support. Once again, Thomas, in helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope we did answer that fairly well. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from Bringer of something. I'm not sure exactly what that means, so I'll have to censor it. But they say you don't need fast missiles to shoot down fast missiles. Fast things travel in relatively straight and predictable paths. However slow your air defense missile is, you just need it flown to the right place at the right time.
And I thank you so much for the support, and that's largely true, but what's crazy about this slower missile intercepting it is that by theory, this missile was so fast, it didn't really need to be maneuverable. It could just blow straight through the air defenses and straight to its target without ever even being intercepted. Not because the missile wouldn't be able to reach it, but because the radar wouldn't really be able to pick it up because it'd be going so fast. So the radar would never have a reliable, I guess you could say, ping on where this thing was. That appears to be completely untrue, though. But you do have a good point. It doesn't really matter the speed of the missile versus the hypersonic one. It just matters if it can get to the right place at the right time to be able to intercept it on its path. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you do make it possible and also share with us a little bit of additional information that we may or may not have known. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $12 super chat. Excuse me. And Margaret says, first one, I think. Exchange rate means my 15 becomes way less. Sorry. And live chat question. And Margaret, I've gotten very good at doing rough estimates of what different currencies translate to. So I estimated it probably went to 12, but I really am not sure. But thank you very much for the support. Oh my God.
Dang! Oh, you good?
I'm trying to like hold back a cough over here and it didn't work.
Man, you said thank you so much for the support. But still, thank you so much for the support, Margaret Hemsley. And it's perfectly fine. Any support means a lot to us, and I thank you so much for finding us worthwhile to support it all, because we are we are more than honored to think that people do find us worthwhile enough to support, whether it be $1, $500, whatever it may be. We thank everyone so much for supporting this channel, and so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, Margaret did ask for a live chat question, and I'm sitting over here trying to hold back this cough so bad. But the question goes to Brian V, who says, did you know that the Russian Kinzhal missile is really not a modern hypersonic at all, and it's actually a modified air-launched Iskander-M missile?
Wait, hang on, let's pull that up. I have to find out. Kinzhal missile. Design. Russian media, in Russian media, the hypersonic feature has been highlighted as a unique feature to create an impression it's a new and advanced its design, while Kinzhal uses a standard ballistic missile technology at greater speeds. The hypersonic feature is shared with many older designs. It does not represent any particular technological breakthrough. The overall design of the missile is shared with the 9K720 Iskander, with the guidance section modified for Kinzhal. It can reportedly hit both static targets and mobile ones, such as aircraft carriers. The high speed of the Kinzhal gives it better target penetration than lighter, slower cruise missiles. With advanced maneuvering capabilities, high precision, and a hypersonic speed, some sources give it the name Carrier Killer due to its alleged ability to disable and possibly even sink a 100,000-ton supercarrier with a single strike, although I would have to call BS on that because there's no way in hell. Russian media state the missile's range is 2,000 kilometers, or about 1,100 nautical miles, when carried by the MiG-31K, and about 1,600 nautical miles when carried by the Tu-22M3 when the aircraft's combat radius is added to the missile's range. So, actually, y'all are right. This thing is just an Iskander for the large part that they've kind of dressed up to look cool. How fast does an Iskander go? One second, let's pull that up. How fast is an Iskander?
Iskander, you said.
So the Iskander missile, the normal Iskander, goes about Mach 6 to Mach 7. And so supposedly, this thing, its reported speed is Mach 10. So it's only an additional 3 Mach speed difference in between it and a normal Iskander, supposedly. But the truth is that considering that it seems, at least from what's said here on Wikipedia, it doesn't really have any additional upgrades rather than the guidance system itself, it may only be capable of Mach 6 to Mach 7.
Could be. I'll have to go with what you're saying.
Yeah. Why are you talking like that? You good?
Well, yeah.
I mean, man, you're about to turn into a killjoy.
I mean, I guess.
Well, you know, killjoy right there in the Wikipedia thing. I highlighted it. You know,
All right.
You're getting all quiet and awkward. It's scary. It's a stop. It's scary. But anyways, it's pretty. You're correct for the large part. It is largely just a modified Iskander, and therefore it may only be as capable as an Iskander. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. Thank you for sharing that with us, by the way, because I actually didn't know that it was just a modified Iskander. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for support and sharing with us some valuable knowledge.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Kay Dickerson. And thank you very much for the support. And it said that, do you think Ukraine already has F-16s or the other equivalent, and all the rhetoric saying that they don't is a feint?
I think that they don't have those aircraft, and it's been a massive push for them because we've seen that things they have secretly gotten, they don't really talk about much. They never really talked about anti-radiation missiles, yet they received them very early on, which shows that once they get something, they don't really mention it much. They also did that with the HIMARS as well. Once they started getting HIMARS, they didn't really bring them up as much as they used to. And I think that it shows that they're not getting any Western aircraft, and on top of that, moving Western aircraft to Ukraine would be such a visible process. There would really be no way to hide it well, because you would either see F-16 airframes crossing a border into Ukraine, or you would see them flying over the border and then into Ukrainian airspace. So there wouldn't really be a good way to hide those aircraft to make it a secret thing that they're receiving them. So with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a $10 super chat and says, take a live chat question and have a good day.
And thank you so much for the support, CK Bold. I will have a good day, and I will get a live chat. Thank you very much. I'm just kidding with you, but with that, let's grab that live chat.
And the live chat question goes to Wes Downer, who says, what was the meaning of Zelenskyy appointing a governor to Sevdivsk, something like that.
Sevadosk?
Sevadosk.
Also, Matthew, real quick, have you seen the bot? Coin.
Oh, coin.
Wait a minute, before you get rid of him. Oh, dang it!
He gone.
No! I was gonna read his stupid messages, because they were pretty funny. This guy said this about us. Hear this out, y'all. This is the good one. The woke propaganda paid by warmongers in Washington, D.C. With like a little bit of sweat coming off the side of the guy who's laughing. And then he said, the neo-Nazi Ukrainians are winning on CNN and BBC. You know what's funny? Is that the sad guy is called the coin, and he's talking about where money's coming from. He's literally the money.
No, that's his wish list. He wants some coin.
No, you know, in all honesty, the reason why he's called the coin is because he's used as much as money. He's handed around to everyone, and everyone knows him. It's
Damn.
We're on to the next. Wait,
Wait, you didn't answer the question.
Reread the live chat again, so that way I can make sure to answer it.
What was the meaning of Zelenskyy appointing a governor to Sevadosk?
I wouldn't really know. To be honest with you, I would have to declare ignorance on that because I haven't heard about that governorship appointment, and so unfortunately, I wouldn't really know a lot about it or the reason behind it. So with that, I thank you so much once again for allowing us, CK Bold, to answer that live chat. Sadly, I don't really have a good answer to that one. But with that, we are on to the next one. Wait a minute, real quick, Matthew. I got to pull up the crying.
For the Wojak.
Yeah, crying Russian Wojak. Let me go grab it. 3 more days. Oh, it is in Wojak Paradise. It is.
Whoa, Jack.
Whoa, Jack. Whoa. Let's see. I gotta go find it now. Here we go. Let's see. Let's go to where the image came from, which is the Twitter.
Peter, the Twitter's here.
Now let me bring it on
3
over.
more days, Papa.
Do I look like a real boy, Papa? Let me shrink it on down here. And let me bring it on up. 3 more days, man. Just 3 more days. They're each being paid by warmongers in Washington. You know, according to our haters, we're paid by just about everyone. I've heard just about everything at this point. We're paid by warmongers. I've seen some people saying, and you know, I'm not saying this in a political light, but I've seen people say we're being paid by Democrats. We're also being paid by Republicans. We're being paid by George Soros himself. We're actually
I'm still waiting on that CIA check.
You know, I'm still waiting on all of these checks. You know, if all of these people are employing us, I wish they'd let us know, because I would love to get paid. Because obviously I'm doing this work apparently for pennies compared to what we would be paid by, like, the NSA or the CIA or Mark Zuckerberg or George Soros or the Republicans or the Democrats. Hell, why not double dip the chip? Why not get paid from both of them? But anyways, the Russian bots are seething. But tonight they haven't been able to DDoS us, though. That's one thing I have noticed. They haven't DDoSed us tonight, but they're still out there seething. And also, man, we're going to have to check that P.O. box for that check, because I feel like now we put everyone on notice, and we'll probably see one in the mail tomorrow. And so with that...
Man, you go to deposit that check, and it's going to bounce out.
We on a bounce out. Not today. But anyways, with that, we're on... Did we answer the live chat that we were on right there?
Let's see. Answer the live chat and have a good day. And I believe you still haven't.
And so let's get to that live chat.
What was the meaning of Zelenskyy appointing a governor to Sverdlovsk?
We actually did answer that one. I did declare ignorance on that one, and we were moving on to the next one.
Up next, we have a $10 super chat from Sharky, who says, "Greetings. I came home from the night shift. I start the stream now from the beginning, and have a nice day, guys. Slava Ukraini."
And thank you so much for the support. And that's perfectly fine. It's always fun to come home from the night shift, because everything feels... I don't know if it's just me, or everything feels kind of unnatural when you get off a night shift at night, because everything's like dead, you know, because I used to come off of like late night shifts at Publix supermarket in the middle of Birmingham, and it was really weird because the gas stations would be empty except for like the occasional tweaker here and there. You know, they were just doing their thing, but everything was empty, and it was always so weird because the lights would be on everywhere but no one was there. It always felt odd to me, but still, I hope you do enjoy the stream, Sharky. You've been around for a long time as well, by the way, and thank you for being an old guard. And also, I hope you have a nice day, or a nice night, that is, since you got off the night shift. And of course, Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And
yes,
with
indeed.
That,
and
oh, okay, damn. You're going to not even let me get through the spill, but with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have an $8 super chat from White Lightning 777. And they said, "Should Ukraine try to instigate fighting between Wagner and the regular Russian army, and sowing chaos could shorten the war?"
Oh, they already have chaos. Remember when the Wagner guys and the Russian army guys were fighting north of Bakhmut and Krasnohora because some of them were getting into positions that the Wagner said they had? Oh, that's already been happening. That's been happening all over. And I would say that it should be encouraged if we can find a way to encourage it, because it only makes the Russians less cohesive of a force and may even inflict losses that we don't even have to fire a shot for. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $6 super chat from Kikari Firehawk, who says, "I'll keep my cages up to spec. My airborne rangers live by high standards. LMAO."
And thank you so much for the support. And make sure that those airborne rangers continue to live up to high standards and keep those cages nice and good. Now, I got to ask, why in the world are you keeping airborne rangers in cages? That sounds kind of odd. I'm just kidding, but still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
Let's see. And also, real quick, I saw a question from the live chat that I want to address. Sax2 said, "If you owned a super yacht, Enforcer Matt, what would you name it?" What would piss the Russians off the most? Might be like something like, this was your yacht, now it's mine. Something along those lines.
Man, I was actually just gonna come up with the name of like a place. you sat there. Well, honestly, mine's gonna sound kind of lame, but I would just name it after a large harbor like Charleston. I know that's kind of lame sounding, but
wait, I would put Putin's yacht on the back of it. Now put big old red like marker like crossing it out, and put mine above it.
Oh, actually, that's a really good one. I like that idea. That's actually a really good one. But I'd still call mine Charleston. With that, I hope we answered that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Raj Kapoor, who puts in a $10 super chat. And thank you, Raj, for the support. He says, keep up the good work, and do you think the Ukrainian offensive has officially begun?
And I thank you so much for the support, Raj. You've been around for a long time as well. I think you're an old guard. And you said, do you think the Ukrainian offensive has officially begun? You know, this is going to sound weird. I would say no. I don't think it has begun. I think this is just a appetizer to the entree of the offensive, and the entree may be somewhere else entirely, because this is great news, and we're seeing the Ukrainians make unbelievable progress here, especially compared to the past few months and how that's been going. But I just don't think this is where it would be, because it's just an odd place for it to happen. So I think the real offensive is yet to come, and it will be somewhere else, in my honest opinion. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Raj, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
And also, I saw some folks saying, name it by Rockter. You could call it Pooping Putin. You could call it Bliakt. You could call it the Moskva 2 or the Mira, or you could call it Bliat.
You know, I would be scared to call it anything that sank, because I feel like that would be a bad omen. But, you know, that's not bad ideas if you want the yacht to sink. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Catfish Avenger, who says, I heard taxis are slow in Moscow because GPS is jammed, and it's weird that Russians would rely upon a U.S. GPS service. What a bunch of rubles.
And you know what's sad is that the Russians always hate the West, but they wear NASA shirts. And I think the favorite candy of the Russians is Snickers. And it's like, how in the world can you hate America but love our stuff? Like, I have to pull it up. Favorite candy in Russia, because I think it is a Snickers. So let's see here.
It's a clumsy bear.
Nah, this is like Russian candies. Like, what kind of candy do they eat in Russia? It's none of these, because you see, the thing is that they gave out Victory Day rations to soldiers on the front lines, like their Victory Day MREs, and inside of them there was no Russian candy. They just gave them Snickers bars, and apparently that means that the Russians love Snickers bars, and they're trying to make something to appeal to the average Russian, and so the Snickers bar was the thing to go with. At least that's what I'm thinking. But I don't understand the Russians, because they hate the West, yet they want to use everything we make. And you see, I'm one of these people who say this: if you're going to dislike something, you can't sit there and use the stuff of someone you dislike and then still hate them, because it doesn't make any sense. It's completely illogical. Because you're going to use that's like saying, let me try and come up with something. That's like saying, oh, I hate Canada. I hate Canada so much, and I hate all Canadians. And then you sit there and you eat, like, Canadian foods that are bought from Canada, and you're into hockey, you know, like, specifically Canadian hockey. You know, it wouldn't make any sense. It's just such a stupid thing, because you absorb everything culturally that they make and produce, yet you hate them. It just makes no sense. And also, I don't
You know what it reminds me of?
What does it remind you?
Russia is jealous of the United States. They hate everything that we have, but they want it at the same time. That's why they'll sit over there and go, oh, the West is trying to infiltrate our place. Oh, I hate the West. Oh, no.
Yeah, you know, it's true. And I got to say, I mean...
Call them out. Call them out.
I gotta be honest with you. I think the Russians hate America because they're not as successful as us. I think that's really what it comes down to. Because... you know, beyond that, they used to, like, back when the Soviet Union just dissolved, everyone in Russia loved America. Like, it was a given, you know, and everyone wanted to emulate what America did. They wanted everything American over there. And then after a while, after they figured out that America was just that good, you know, as a country and a culture and what we had, they started to then resent it. And I think that's what it is that they resent the United States because the United States is far more successful than their country can be. Because you can see that while the Chinese are not big fans of the United States, the average Chinese citizen does not have as much a disdain for the United States as Russians do. And that's because they view their own country as somewhat successful and actually not as bad off as others would be compared to the United States. So they don't have that kind of resentment against the U.S. that Russians have. But it's still there in a way.
Yeah, how many Americans have you seen wanting to say that they want to go to Russia? But you hear about a lot of Russians wanting to come to America.
Dude, you hear about a lot of Russians wanting to travel anywhere outside of Russia. You don't ever hear of anyone going, yeah, I would love to go to Moscow. Like, who in the hell goes, yes, I'd love to go to Moscow? Nobody. I mean, like,
they will settle on anything versus Russia at this point. They'll go to Latvia, Estonia, Finland. They'll go anywhere. They'd even go to Ukraine.
Remember the Russian guy who, like, okay, I'll tell you all this story. We were in Britain one time on vacation, and this was a long time ago. I think it was like 2018 or something like that. And I was at Paddington Station because we had just gotten off the train, and my mom had to go to the restroom. So I stood outside while she was at the restroom, and this guy walked up to me, and I'm telling y'all, he was like the quintessential, like, so he was dressed up just like the guy. Like, he was literally dressed up like that. So he walks up to me, and he goes, excuse me, do you know where the brown line is? And I say, what? He's like, do you know where brown line is? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm kind of new to this place. And he said, oh, well, your English is very good. Where are you from? I said, I'm from America. He said, oh, man, well, wherever that is, you'll have good English over there. He didn't even know what America was, I guess, because he said that like he didn't even know what the United States was. But anyways, he was there. Like, in the middle of London, there were Russians. They want to be anywhere but there. No one wants to go to Russia, though. Nobody wants to go to Russia. But they want to go everywhere else. And that tells you how much they don't like Russia. And then they even despise the people who do want to leave Russia. You know, they call them the fifth columnists. You know, the people who aren't really true Russians because they don't live in squalor like the rest of us. You know, and it's really bizarre that way. But with that, I do thank you for the support. And I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You know, speaking of encounters in Britain, do you remember when that guy, when we were going to some kind of event where you had to, like, pay to get in? And we were trying to ask the guy, do y'all accept credit cards? So I literally asked out the window. I said, excuse me, sir, do y'all accept credit card? And he turned around and said, oh, yes, we do. Even your American ones.
He was just kidding with you, man.
That man meant it.
Nah, man, he was just kidding with you. You've taken that personally ever since like 2019 or something. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and we're moving in to our live chat questions because we are all out of super chats. And of course, up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. We have Mark Hodges, C-Fay, JP's Gone Fishing, and Cliff Simonson. They said the Morse code dispatch tonight says Russians are coping, seething, and crying their eyes out. Pull up the Wojak.
3 more days! 3 more days!
Wojak.
What, fatty? You can't take over a country in 3 days? What happened? What the hell were the Russians even thinking? Like, Ukraine is like, hang on, let me go to true size map, and let me go put Ukraine on Iraq. We're gonna kill millions of people doing this, putting a country on top of another one, but let me go grab Ukraine. Boom, there we go, Ukraine. Move down to Iraq. Okay. Wow, actually, Iraq and Ukraine are kind of similarly sized.
Wow, Ukraine could put Iraq inside of Ukraine.
I wonder. That's interesting.
Ukraine could take over the world like that.
If
they just put their country over others, it's done.
So let's see here. What's the total size of Iraq? It is 100 and wait, hang on. It is, I think, total size. Okay, so it's 169,235 square miles. Ukraine is 233,000 square miles. So Ukraine is a little bit larger than Iraq, but not really by a lot, interestingly enough. So Iraq is, well, actually, Ukraine is bigger than Iraq, and we took over Iraq. Well, actually, we defeated Iraq in the Gulf War, I think in about a month and like 3 weeks or so. And then the Russians thought that they could invade a country and take it over that was larger than Iraq, and it took us a month and a half to be able to defeat Iraq in the Gulf War. They thought they could do that in 3 days? That was just an idiotic timetable to go off of at the start, even, considering the size of the country.
Yeah, it's crazy. If Ukraine did this and they moved their country from where it is now closer to the U.S., we'd probably be more inclined to get involved directly.
Yeah, that's true. And also,
Just moving into Alabama.
Yeah, just moving into Alabama. How big is Ukraine compared to Alabama? Let's go find out. So it's actually pretty big. It's actually the size of Georgia, Alabama, most of Mississippi, and the Panhandle put together.
They could fit almost all the rednecks in Ukraine.
Yeah, they could. They could. Dang, that's actually pretty big when you put it into that context.
That is wild. You could encompass the beach. Ukraine, wow, they could have it made if they would just like move it right to this spot.
Man, they just literally plop down on top of us. We get crushed to death from above, from the whole Ukraine just falling on top of us.
Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine. No, it just get crushed. But dang, man, it makes New York look tiny. Really, it makes New England look tiny. That's really crazy when you think about it, but let's get rid of that. And also, for scale, this is the United States superimposed on top of Europe, just to give an idea to everyone in Europe how big America is. You can travel all the way from what in the United States would be Buffalo, New York, all the way to London, and that would be about where Salt Lake City is. So that's
why is it sagging in the front?
Oh, because a flat map is actually a Mercator projection, so it's taking the shape of the globe and trying to flatten it out. So the higher up you go towards either end, so if you go really south or you go really north, the country expands. The equator is the most accurate representation of size. But when you go further south, it gets larger, and then when you go further north, it also gets larger.
When you take it down below the equator, it looks like a dog or something. Like, put it on down below.
1 second. Let me drag it down here.
That's a dog.
Oh my god. Dude, this looks bad, actually. This is terrible looking. That's so cursed. What does China look like? Goodness me, man. This is...
Looks like an elk.
Where in the world are you getting these animals from? I don't even know where. Wait a minute. How big is Alaska compared to Europe? Dang! I didn't, you never really think about this stuff in scale, but, like, Alaska is the size of Western Europe.
That is crazy. Alaska is huge.
Yeah, Alaska is massive. How big is it compared to the continental United States? I think it's like half the size, isn't it? Nah, not really. It's like a third of the size. But it's crazy to think about how big Alaska is. It's like a whole country unto itself.
Yeah, that was a lot of land we bought for pretty cheap back in the day.
Yeah, from those idiot Russians. They sat there.
Stupid Russians.
They sat there and went, yeah, it's worthless. You can buy it for like 2 cents an acre. And we went, oh, thank you. And then we found oil and they went, bleh.
They're not very good on the battlefield or the negotiating table, it turns out.
No, man. We sat there and said, yes, we would like Anchorage, please. We would just like to buy the area around Anchorage. And then they sat there and went, wait a minute, we have the Toto negotiator. Yes, we'll sell you the whole thing. What? It's like, wait a minute, hang on.
And they were probably saying, look at these stupid Americans buying all this useless land.
It's useless, please. They'll never find anything there. And then we found gold, like, just literally, I think a few years later. And then we found oil there about several decades later. And the whole time the Russians are going, Alaska was really ours. They stole it from us. It wasn't a bunch of goofs. But anyways... Yeah, that's the United States compared to Europe. I don't even know why we're harping on that so much. But anyways, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, if that was even a question we were answering. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have another super chat. This one is from Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a $2 super chat and says, "Name the yacht Neo Yaxi."
That is.
But we'd be driving it though. That's not good.
That's ban worthy. I'm just kidding. That's actually not that bad. But we would be running that yacht. So a good naming idea if it was Putin owning the yacht, but we're owning the yacht. So that we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next live chat goes to JC the Music Man, who says, "Do you think Russia's realized the only way to escape Russia is by heading to Ukraine to surrender?"
That's actually an interesting idea. I think that may be his only way out at this point. So I would say that's true, and I would say that's pretty wild when you think about it too. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And while Moses Zero talks about how easily distracted I am, which I am, I will admit, because some things are just interesting to talk about and rabbit hole on. Another rabbit hole to think about, Matthew, is how much land the United States just straight up purchased from people. Like just going around buying crap. the Louisiana purchase, pretty much everything from Montana down to Louisiana in like a funnel shape. Just bought it. You know, that's weird.
And the negotiation tactic was pretty good actually, because if they couldn't buy the land, we just took it.
Well, not really. I mean, we weren't going to take that from France. You know, we were just going to kind of.
Oh, I know, is we ended up buying it.
Yeah, dude, we sat there and went to Napoleon and said, hello, we would like to buy this for like $5 million, and Napoleon went, deal. We were like, oh, okay, thank you. And then we just went out further west. I think this area, we actually ended up treating this whole area, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, from the British, because this is actually a part of British Columbia, believe it or not, the British Columbia territory, or the Western Territory as it was called at the time. And we ended up negotiating this out of the British hands by saying, let's just draw up a perfect line. I believe this is on the 48th parallel. And we just said, we'll draw a straight line across the continent. Everything south will be ours. Everything north will be yours. And they said, deal. So they just gave up a large part of British Columbia. And also they gave it up because there was a lot of Americans living here. They outnumbered the British 7-1 in this part of the territory. So there was really no way they could make a argument that it really was theirs, because there was more Americans living there than there were Brits. And then this area, most of this we just took from Mexico. We took everything from Texas to California in the Mexican-American War. And then we bought this little slither of New Mexico and Arizona from them in the Gadsden Purchase about in 1853. But for the most part, except for the area in between Texas and California, we either negotiated our way into having most of this land or just straight up bought it, including Alaska. And then we annexed Hawaii, which was kind of a whole story unto itself. But a really weird way how we got our land, because most people either just claimed it, but we bought most of it. Then just wanted a decent amount of it for the rest of it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have another super chat. This one is from Catfish Avenger once again, who puts in a $2 super chat and says, name that yacht Finders Keepers.
Yeah, I like that one. That's a pretty good one. I would name it Finders Keepers. And so with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one from the live chat goes to Jim Kolari, who says, isn't there mobile nukes stationed in a base in Belgorod, if I'm not mistaken?
I think there are mobile nukes stations. Oh, well, actually, mobile nukes are never really stationed specifically anywhere. They just drive around the Russian Federation almost nonstop. But I do think that whenever they stop to be serviced, I think there is a servicing station somewhere in Belgorod for the Topols, but I'm not exactly certain on that. I really have to declare ignorance on that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Stefan Fisher, who says, do you think the Ukrainians are using any of their funding to fund Russian partisans to attack inside of Russia?
They probably are, because partisan activities and stuff like that is pretty normal fare, and they usually try and support their own partisans inside of foreign countries. So I wouldn't doubt that they're supporting them. It's just that they're probably not giving a massive amount of funding. You know, it's not like tens of millions or hundreds of millions. It's probably just a few million that those partisans are getting, because you can't really give them a lot, because it's really hard to ship the material to them. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Cassie G, who says, have you guys heard about Ukraine pilots being evaluated on the Harrier 2s we've been phasing out for F-35Bs?
I have heard about that, but some people are saying that that's a very unlikely thing that the Ukrainians will get, because Harriers are about one of the most difficult aircraft to maintain and operate that the Western world has ever used. Now, it's a great aircraft, don't get me wrong. In the right trained hands with the right kind of technicians and ground crew, the Harrier is an amazing aircraft. But for the Ukrainians, it's probably a little out of their reach considering the time frame they have to work with. Now, I'm not saying that they couldn't learn how to operate this thing and their pilots couldn't be trained on it. It's just that they're trying to do things as fast as possible, and there could be better alternatives rather than the Harrier, like the F-16, the F-18, or any of those kind of aircraft that could come in as, I guess you could say, a replacement to a Harrier instead. But still, I have heard about that a little bit, but people are very skeptical that will really go anywhere. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have another super chat, this time from Dark Warrior 137 yet again, who puts in a 2 and says, for the yacht fund, only need $2 for a ski mask.
Well, thank you so much for the optimism, Dark Warrior 137, and I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I thank you for the ski mask fund. I think ski masks are more expensive than that these days. Let me pull that up. Let me check.
Inflation.
Ski mask for sale. That ski mask-flation, you know what I mean? Yeah, they're like in between $3.99 and $8.99. Man.
Damn, the robbers have it tough these days.
Dude, oh my god. Wait, hang on. Hold up. I gotta show you this one. Oh man, I can't because it's on Amazon and it shows like all of my info. One second, let me go to Google Images and see if I can get it here. Dang it, it's not showing up, is it? I gotta find it though. That was a gold one. Let's see.
And while you're finding that, I saw Noob of the Year say VTOL sounds like a useful capability, and it was on GTA when I got the Hydra. It worked pretty good there, but I'm not sure how good it'd be for the Ukrainians, to be honest. They'd be much better off with like an F-18.
Okay, this isn't the one I'm looking for, Matthew, but this will do. This is a stitch pop. Give me all your money.
Hey, Biatman.
Imagine getting robbed by someone wearing that ski mask, man.
They puffed.
You know, it's like the Marshmallow Man.
Oh.
Dude, I honestly couldn't get robbed by someone wearing that, man. I would just have to refuse being robbed. But look at this one. It's got a little thing on top of it.
That's a bloke.
That is a bloke and a half. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Melissa Smith, Bobcat Detonator, who says, did you guys see the Russian propagandist, that devil, pushing for nuclear war?
I did see that. I was going to include that in the news tonight, but that guy's just a straight idiot. And, you know, it's fun to listen to him sometimes, but stuff like that, it's so dumb. I can't even show it because I just kind of feel goofy showing it and responding to it because I don't think the idiot gets it, but we win in every regard. At this point, you know, hell, we can a Patriot can now shoot down a Kinzel, so it's not really like it would be a fair exchange. We just obliterate the Russians. The Russians will, of course, hit us pretty badly. I honestly don't think they'd obliterate us, though. I think we would end up obliterating them. We would come out of it almost dead, though. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next question goes to Eric Kress, who says, Enforcer Matt, so why haven't more supersonic missiles been shot down? I just thought I'd ask and not trying to start an argument. And I have to say, that's a good point, Eric. And I must admit, I can't ignore it. I'm still a little bit skeptical about it. To me, I found it kind of odd how quickly the Pentagon press secretary fellow brushed over it when he was asked about it. He almost didn't really give it much thought. He just said yes very quickly and then moved on to the next thing. I'm still skeptical. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say they did shoot it down. The physical proof is there. You know, the parts are there in Kyiv.
Yeah, I mean, they could have gotten that from anywhere. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean they shot it down with the Patriot.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, I would say it would because you would see explosive residue all over them if they had blown up on something and then they just gathered up the pieces. I would say they did shoot it down because if the Department of Defense is saying it, whether they glossed over it or not, he gave a clear statement, yes, it was shot down. The Ukrainians then gave a clear statement that it was shot down. I would say that it may be an iffy thing to be able to shoot one of these things down, and it may have been that that air defense system was at the right place and right time, because you also have to remember that things that are highly unlikely, if not considered impossible, have happened before, like an F-117 Nighthawk being shot down over Serbia. You know, and, you know, everyone could sit there and go, I don't believe that because, you know, it can't really be shot down. People say it couldn't be shot down. It's kind of weird, a little circumstantial. You could get an F-117 cockpit from just about anywhere. And let me show the pictures. You know, you can just get F-117 parts or fabricate them from anywhere. That's no real proof that an F-117 was shot down because it's stealth and therefore could never be shot down. Yet one was because it was a fluke where everything was at the right place, the right time, and the Serbian air defense crew was able to send a surface-to-air missile straight into the bomb bay doors of the F-117 and shoot the thing down. I honestly think they did shoot down the Kinzel. I don't think it's something that'll be easily repeatable, but it does show it's possible. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next question goes to Isel, who says, is the U.S. Hawk air defense system any good? And I saw an AP report with anonymous source. It was going to be sent in a new package.
I gotta be honest with you, it's not that good. It's a very old surface-to-air missile system from about the 1960s and 1950s. It's very dated, and even the most modernized versions of it from the late 70s are not that great. At least from what we know. They wouldn't really stand up well in a modern environment because the newest iteration of them is about 50 years old at this point. So I would say they probably aren't going to do that well, but they would do well against some of the more static targets like Shaheds or anything similar. They could probably shoot those down with relative ease. They may even be able to shoot down aircraft with ease. But things like cruise missiles, probably not. That would be a lot more difficult for those missiles to be able to pull. Well, yeah, those surface-to-air missiles to be able to pull off. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Agro, who says, Matt, if there is a radiation leak, etc., at a Zaporizhzhia power station, do you think that Russia will use that as an excuse to use tactical nuclear weapons to turn the war?
Can you reread that one again?
If there is a radiation leak, etc., at the Zaporizhzhia power station, do you think Russia will use that as an excuse to use tactical nuclear weapons to turn the war?
I don't think they will, because if something like that happens, it's most likely going to be blamed on the Russians. And then if they use tactical nuclear weapons, they once again cross America's red line of no biological, nuclear, or chemical warfare, and then we would get involved, at least off of our guarantee from last year. So I don't think they would be doing that, in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Trister1, who says, what are your thoughts on lead and nitrite levels in future Ukrainian crops? They're important to the world.
I would say that the lead and nitrite levels most likely would be low. They may be there a little bit, but most of the time, if the lead and nitrite levels are high enough, they'll kill off the crops before they can even be harvested. So I would say the chances of that being a real concern are probably low. Because we even saw that the Fukushima disaster, at least from a public standpoint, didn't really affect Japanese crops a lot. And that was a major concern, is that some of the radioactive fallout that reached as far south as almost inner Tokyo to a small degree was going to affect some of the crops that were grown in between Fukushima and Tokyo. But when those crops made it to harvest and then to the stores, people made some measurements on those crops and saw that the radioactive material in them was largely just background noise, although supposedly that area was within a small amount of radioactive contamination. So I don't think we'll be seeing anything that really affects crops, at least if we take the Fukushima disaster, which was a radiological disaster, as a applicable scenario to lead and nitrite poisoning. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next question goes to Marion Deemer again, who says, Enforcer, will Russian soldiers who surrendered also be sent back to Russia?
They may be, because prisoner exchanges don't really put, from what we can tell, take into account whether those soldiers voluntarily surrendered or whether they really had no choice but to surrender to save their lives. It doesn't really take that into much account. They may, but we never really heard anything official on that, so it may be that they are eventually exchanged and sent back to Russia. But, you know, then again, that's kind of one of the double-edged swords of war. Things like that, you know, just sometimes happen, I guess. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Seswa90, who says, if the Russians knew this war was lost a month in, why would they commit so hard for this long? And I don't get why or what they could possibly have gained that was worth it. And Seswa, I think they're personally caught in a catch-22. I don't think they probably want to be there at this point because they know they're about to get slaughtered. But they can't just pull out because then they'd look really weak.
And I would have to agree with Matthew on that. If they withdrawed in the first month, it would have been an abysmal failure and an absolute victory for the Ukrainians. It would have made the Russians look incredibly weak, and they wouldn't be taken seriously from there forward. However, they keep the war going. There was the potential there that they may be able to eventually end the war and win it. But that idea has completely disappeared. I don't even think the Russians have an idea of winning this war anymore. They're just trying to go on as long as they can. So I would say that's the reason why they continued on beyond the first month, because either it was deal with dreadful embarrassment, or maybe a miracle would happen and they'd be able to win the war in maybe 6 months or a year or so. But then that never happened. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Boot, who says, any idea if Russia has employed any T-34s in Ukraine?
We have not seen any T-34s in Ukraine. The oldest tank we've seen are T-54s. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And the viewer who threw in the lucky last question of the night is Vlad Romanyuk, who says, can the Kinzhal maneuver at hypersonic speeds? If not, then it's not considered hypersonic, per the technical definition beyond its speed. Ballistic missiles are also hypersonic, but their trajectory is predictable, I think he meant to say.
is supposedly it can maneuver, at least according to official public sources. But once again, that's put into question considering it's largely based off of an Iskander ballistic missile. It could be the case that it can't maneuver at all, and all of this stuff is nothing more than hype talk. But we don't really know. It supposedly can, so it would make it technically a hypersonic. But beyond that, we only have the public statements to go off of, and we'd never seen the thing actually fly. We've only seen it hit a target once near Ivano from Kyiv way early on in the war, and that was the only footage we've ever seen of one in flight. Beyond that, we've only heard of them impacting targets, and that's about it. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank every single one of y'all so much for watching, and if y'all did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe as we run these kinds of streams 6 days a week, every single night, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine in video and picture evidence. We also run daily summaries now, and a lot of y'all seem to be loving those, and we will be keeping those up as a daily thing. Those will even be coming out on Mondays. So while you may not be able to watch the stream, you will be able to watch a short war summary. And so with that, thank you all so much once again. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, and of course, Slava Ukraini. And I'll see you all tomorrow, again, at the same time. Good night, and take care.
And Slava Ukraine, and 3 more days, Papa. Do I look like a real boy, Papa?
Yes. The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми